Maine tapped a steady rhythm against the leaded windows of Hermione Granger's study, the kind of soft, persistent drizzle that blurred the edges of London and turned the Ministry of Magic into a ghostly silhouette across the Thames. Inside, the air hummed with the quiet energy of enchanted parchment and slow-burning candles. Hermione sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by open tomes on forgotten magical phenomena, songs that summoned storms, lullabies that warded off dementors, elegies sung at the founding of Hogwarts. Her fingers traced a passage in star-linguistic echoes of pre-modern enchantment star when it began. At first she thought it was the wind, a low, swelling note that curled around the eaves, almost too soft to be real. Then it rose, clear and shimmering, like silver thread pulled taut across the sky. The candle flames stilled. The pages of her books stopped rustling. Even Crookshanks, curled in his basket by the hearth, lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes wide with something like recognition. The melody unfolded in slow, liquid phrases, no words, only sound, yet it carried meaning deeper than language. Hermione felt it in her ribs, in the hollow behind her collarbone. A memory surfaced unbidden. Her mother humming in the kitchen, sunlight on the linoleum, the smell of toast and orange marmalade. It was so vivid she nearly called out. Then came the ache. It wasn't her own. It pressed against her chest, heavy and ancient, a sorrow that had no name. She gasped, clutching the edge of the table. Her vision blurred. For a heartbeat, she saw a woman with white gold hair standing on a cliffside, arms outstretched toward a storm-racked sea, her mouth open in song. The image vanished as quickly as it came. The song swelled, trembling in the air like a living thing. Outside, a siren wailed. No, not a siren. A voice. Then another. From the street below she heard footsteps, slow and uncoordinated, as people emerged from their homes, eyes glazed, faces turned upward, as if drawn by moonlight. Hermione scrambled for her wand, heart pounding. She cast a star, Muffliato star, at the window, then a silencing charm on the room. The song dimmed, but it didn't stop. It seeped through the wards, through the stone, through her skin. It was inside her now. She reached for the enchanted mirror on the wall, the one that linked to the Department of Mysteries. Or her office. Emergency channel, she said, voice tight. This is Hermione Granger, Senior Advisor on Magical Anomalies. I need immediate contact with Hogwarts. Now. Static crackled. Then Kingsley's voice, low and urgent. Hermione? We've got reports from Lyon, Prague, Reykjavik. People wandering into traffic, weeping. Some attacking each other. All saying they heard. A song. It's here, she whispered. In London. It's not just sound. It's magic, old magic. Veela origin, I think, but not like anything in the records. A pause. Then, we've pulled Malfoy in. He's the only one with access to the old Black family archives on cross-species enchantments. He's resistant to certain Veela influences. Might be able to help. Hermione closed her eyes. Draco Malfoy. The last person she wanted in her world right now. But the song pulsed again, and with it came a flood of images. Burning villages, a silver chain breaking, a child screaming in a language she didn't know but understood all the same. Fine, she said. But tell him to hurry. This isn't just a song, Kingsley. It's a call. And something or someone is answering. The parchment arrived at dawn, slipped beneath her door with no owl, no seal, just her name written in jagged script that made the letters seem to shiver. Hermione Granger picked it up barefoot, the cold wood of her London flat pressing into her heels, and the moment her fingers brushed the paper, a soft, wordless note hummed through the air. It wasn't loud, not even clear, but it curled beneath her ribs like smoke, warm, insistent, impossible to ignore. She dropped the parchment as if burned. By the time she reached the ministry, the song had already seeped into the lifts. It wove through the gears and chains, threading into the mechanical groan of descent, turning the clatter of metal into something melodic. The usual silence of early morning had been replaced by a hush that wasn't silence at all, whispers, sighs, and that same haunting refrain, now layered with voices that hadn't been there before. One wizard stood frozen in the lift, eyes unfocused, a tear tracing a slow path down his cheek. Another clutched his wand so tightly, his knuckles had gone white, muttering counter-charms under his breath. Hermione stepped into the Department of Mysteries, where the air itself felt heavier, charged with a resonance that made her teeth ache. The veil in the center chamber fluttered, though there was no draft. It wasn't supposed to move. Not since. Not since. They've tried silencing charms, said Kingsley Shacklebolt, his deep voice low, measured. He stood near the archway, arms crossed, his expression carved from stone, but his eyes betrayed him. He'd heard it too. Obliviations, anti-sonic wards, nothing sticks. The song absorbs magic like water, soaks into sands. She approached the veil cautiously. It's not just sound, is it? No, Kingsley said. It's memory, it's desire. It's blood ancient magic, something predating even the oldest wards we know. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small crystal vial, a recording charm she developed during her post-war research on residual enchantments. When she uncorked it near the veil, the air shimmered, and the song poured inside, winding into the glass like silver thread. The vial grew warm, too warm. She sealed it quickly, heart hammering. It's spreading, she said. I heard it in my flat, in the lifts. If it's affecting enchanted spaces, then it's already inside the wards. Kingsley finished. Hogwarts reported disturbances last night. Students dreaming in unison. Teachers finding spells unraveling mid-cast. And in France, an entire village of magical folk stood in a circle, singing back to the wind. They didn't stop for 12 hours. Hermione closed her eyes, trying to separate the emotion from the evidence. The song tugged at something primal, longing, yes, but also a kind of recognition, as if it spoke in a language her soul remembered even if her mind did not. We need to trace the source, she said, opening her eyes, before it starts rewriting intent, before people stop distinguishing between enchantment and choice. Kingsley nodded. I've already called in assistance. She turned, and there, stepping through the archway with the weary grace of someone who'd rather be anywhere else, was Draco Malfoy. He looked different, leaner, paler, shadows under his eyes like ink smudges. But his voice, when he spoke, was crisp, untouched by time. Granger, he said, not quite meeting her gaze. I hear the world's going mad, and you're the one expected to fix it. She braced herself. And I hear you're the only one who can read the old Veela dialects without needing a translation charm. He smirked, but there was no humor in it. Joy. So we're chasing a siren song through ancient folklore. How very poetic. The song rose again, faint now, as if listening. And for a heartbeat, they both stood still. Two people who had survived war, betrayal, the weight of legacy, now facing something neither could name, but both felt to their bones. The air in the Ministry's Department of Mysteries hummed with the low thrum of contained magic, a vibration that settled in Hermione's bones like distant thunder. She stood before the obscurial archive, her fingers tracing the spine of a crumbling grimoire, bound in silver-threaded leather. Dust motes danced in the narrow shafts of enchanted light filtering through the high obsidian windows. For 3 nights she had pored over texts older than Hogwarts, chasing whispers of a melody that had begun in the south of France, where an entire village had danced themselves to exhaustion beneath a blood-red moon, their eyes glassy, their voices rising in unison to a song no one could recall learning. Granger. The voice cut through the quiet like a knife, smooth, cold, and unmistakably familiar. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. The scent of sandalwood and frost, the precise click of polished boots on stone. Draco Malfoy had always announced himself without speaking. You're late, she said, closing the book with a soft thud. I was detained. One can't simply abandon ancestral wards on a whim, especially when half the Malfoy bloodline rests beneath them. He stepped beside her, his pale eyes scaling the shelves with a mixture of disdain and reverence. Though I suppose you wouldn't understand. And yet, here you are. She finally looked at him. 10 years had softened the sharp edges of his youth, but not the intensity of his gaze. His hair, still the color of winter wheat, was pulled back at the nape of his neck. He wore charcoal-gray robes, unadorned but undeniably expensive. By order of the Wisingamote, he said flatly. It seems my fluency in Old High Sylvan and my family's unfortunate star entanglement with Veela nobility, make me uniquely qualified to assist the Ministry's premier scholar star in matters of enchantment. Hermione exhaled through her nose. They didn't tell you, did they? Tell me what? The song, she said, lowering her voice. "It's not just affecting muggles. Ours in Prague reported a squad of trained wizards weeping in the streets, babbling about lost lovers. In Croatia, a coven of witches tried to jump into the sea, singing in a language none of them speak, and it's spreading northward." Malfoy's jaw tightened. "That's impossible. The old psalms were sealed after the War of Thorns. No one alive should be able to summon them." "Someone did," she said, "and they're not just singing it. They're star-awakening it." A silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken history. The last time they'd worked together, briefly during the reconstruction of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, had ended in a shouting match over ethics and blood purity. He'd called her a self-righteous know-it-all. She'd accused him of hiding behind ancestral privilege. Now, the weight of something older than their feud pressed down on the room. "You know what the worst part is?" she asked. "The melody. It changes. It adapts. In Estonia, it sounded like a lullaby. In Trieste, like a lover's plea. But always star, always star. It leaves behind broken minds and burning hearts." Malfoy turned to her, his expression unreadable. "And you think I can help stop it? I think you're the only one who might understand what its star wants star." He let out a breath, almost a laugh. "You're asking me to dive into the ruins of my family's shame." The Malfoys were star curators, star of Veela magic, Granger. "We didn't protect it, we you star it, seduced diplomats, broke wills, bent minds with a whisper. I'm not asking you to be proud of it," she said. "I'm asking you to use what you know. Before this song finds its way to London, and Merlin only knows what it will do here." He studied her for a long moment, then reached past her, pulling a slim volume from the shelf. The cover was etched with curling script that shimmered faintly. "The Psalm of Elara," he murmured. "They said she was the first Veela to bind her soul to music. That when her lover died, she sang so beautifully, the stars fell from the sky. And when they didn't bring him back, she sang until the world forgot her name." Hermione felt a chill. "That's not in any of the records." "Because it's not a story," Malfoy said, meeting her eyes. "It's a warning. And if this is truly Elara's song returning, then we're not just chasing a spell." He paused, the weight of the book in his hands like an oath. "We're chasing a ghost who still wants to be loved." The wind carried it before they saw the village, a thread of sound, soft as breath against glass, rising and falling in a melody that did not belong to any language. Hermione recognized, yet stirred something deep and ancient behind her ribs. It curled through the trees like smoke, wrapping around the trunks of ancient oaks and slipping into the hollows of roots. Draco stopped walking, one hand lifting instinctively, fingers splay as if to catch the air. "Do you hear that?" he said, voice low. Hermione nodded. "It's beautiful," she admitted, then immediately frowned. "But it shouldn't be." They had apparated just beyond the boundary of Mordu, a small wizarding enclave tucked into the Breton countryside, long protected by concealment charms and forgotten by most ministry records. Now those same charms flickered at the edges, unstable, like candlelight in a draught. The song pulsed beneath the silence of the woods, slow and hypnotic, each note lingering longer than it should, as if time itself had grown drowsy. They moved forward, wands drawn, boots quiet on damp earth. The first sign of trouble came at the edge of the village. A goat, standing motionless in a patch of clover, eyes wide and unblinking. Its chest rose and fell, but its head didn't turn as they passed. Beyond it, a woman in a faded blue apron stood in her doorway, one hand still holding a kettle, steam curling into the still air. Her lips moved faintly, repeating a phrase in a language Hermione didn't know, her voice blending into the melody. Draco stepped closer, cautious. "Madame?" No response. Her eyes were glassy, fixed on some distant point. Only she could see. Her fingers trembled slightly on the kettle's handle, but she didn't drop it. "They're not asleep," Hermione whispered. "They're entranced." Draco turned, scanning the narrow cobbled street. Windows were open, curtains still. A child's wooden broom lay abandoned in the road. A cat sat statue still on a windowsill, tail unmoving. The entire village seemed suspended, caught in the breath between heartbeats. "This isn't just a charm," Draco said. "It's deeper, older. That song, it's not just sound. It's magic woven into tone. Veela lullabies were said to do this. Unlock memory, twist time, making live inside a dream so real you'd die for it." Hermione swallowed. "Then we need to find the source before they lose themselves completely." They moved toward the center of the village, where a small stone well stood, half covered in ivy. There, beneath the branches of a silver-barked tree, they found a young man sitting cross-legged, eyes closed, fingers resting on the strings of a lute that wasn't there a moment before. It shimmered into existence as they watched, carved from pale wood, etched with runes that pulsed faintly blue. The instrument wasn't here, Draco murmured. Its star appeared, star with the song. Hermione stepped forward, wand raised. "We need to stop it." "No." Draco caught her wrist, gently but firmly. "Not yet. That lute, it's not just magical. It's star, alive star. If you disrupt it violently, the backlash could shatter their minds." She looked at him, surprised. "Since when do you care about peasant minds, Malfoy?" He didn't flinch. "Since I recognized the runes. That's not just Veela script. It's Star Sylphian Star, a dialect spoken by the wood-bound Veela before they vanished. My grandmother used to whisper stories about them. They didn't enchant people to harm them. They sang to star remember star, to grieve." Hermione hesitated. "Then why are these people frozen?" "Because they're remembering something they never lived," he said softly. "Or someone." The song shifted then, deepening, and for a heartbeat, Hermione saw, not with her eyes but in her mind, a woman with silver hair standing on a cliff above the storm-lashed sea, singing into the wind. The image vanished as quickly as it came, leaving her breathless. Draco's face was pale. "We're not just hunting a song," he said. "We're chasing a ghost." The wind carried it again, soft at first, like a breath against the nape of her neck, then swelling into a ripple that stirred the leaves above and sent a shiver through the ancient oaks lining the forest path. Hermione stood frozen, one hand braced against the moss-slick bark of a yew, her breath shallow. It wasn't just sound, it was presence. Draco exhaled sharply beside her. "It's closer." She nodded, not trusting her voice. The melody had no words, yet it spoke, of longing, of salt-stummed shores, and weeping willows, bending low over still water. It tugged at something deep, something primal, like a half-remembered lullaby from childhood. But beneath its beauty, a thread of dissonance coiled, subtle and insidious. Her fingers trembled as she pulled a small silver compass from her cloak. Its needle didn't point north. Instead it spun erratically, then settled toward the heart of the forest, drawn by magic older than the ministry itself. "There's a pattern," she murmured, crouching to examine the forest floor. Between the gnarled roots, faint symbols had been etched into the soil. Runes, but not any she recognized from Hogwarts. They pulsed with a soft, bluish light, fading in and out like a slow heartbeat. Draco knelt beside her, his expression unreadable. "Fey script. From the old tongue. I've only seen it in my grandmother's books, locked away in the Malfoy library for generations. She used to say it was too dangerous to study." Hermione looked up sharply. "Dangerous how?" He hesitated. "It binds, not through spells, but through memory, through blood. These runes, they're not just markers, they're anchors. The song, it's using them to root itself in our world." She traced the nearest symbol with the tip of her wand. A low hum vibrated through the wood, and for a moment she saw, no, star-felt star, a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, her silver hair streaming like mist, singing into the wind. Then the vision shattered. "Did you see that?" Hermione whispered. Draco's jaw tightened. "Yes, and I felt her grief, like it was mine." They sat in silence as the melody faded, retreating like a tide, but the air still hummed with its residue, thick with the scent of sea salt and blooming nightshade. "This isn't just a Veela enchantment," Hermione said at last. "It's older. Fey magic doesn't work like ours. It doesn't obey rules. Its star rewrites star them. These runes, they're not just guiding the song, they're star remembering star it." Draco stood, brushing dirt from his knees. "Then someone, or something, is trying to bring it back, fully. or someone never let it go. She rose slowly, eyes scanning the trees. Veela songs are tied to emotion, to legacy. If this melody has been dormant for centuries, it means it was buried for a reason. And now it's waking up. A cold gust swept through the clearing, stirring the runes once more. The blue light flared, and a single note hung in the air, pure and aching. Hermione closed her eyes. This time the vision was clearer. A stone tower on a craggy isle, ivy-choked and half-collapsed. A woman in white, her face turned to the sky, voice rising in sorrow. And behind her, a man in dark robes, his hand outstretched, not to comfort, but to sever. She gasped, stumbling back. Draco caught her arm. "What did you see?" "The origin," she said, voice trembling. "I think I know where the song began." She met his gaze, the weight of centuries pressing between them. "And I think it remembers you." The wind carried it first, a thread of sound so delicate, it might have been the sigh of leaves or the breath of tide against stone. Hermione paused on the cliff path, one hand braced against the lichen-speckled rock wall, her breath catching not from exertion, but from the sudden, inexplicable warmth blooming in her chest. It was a melody unlike any she'd studied, no clear language, yet it seemed to speak directly to the marrow of her bones. A single looping phrase, rising and falling like a sigh, caught between longing and sorrow. Draco halted a few paces ahead, his cloak snapping in the coastal wind. He turned slowly, gray eyes narrowed, scanning the empty sea below, the gray sky above. "Do you hear that?" "Yes," she whispered, though she hadn't meant to speak at all. It swelled then, not in volume, but in presence, as if the air itself had begun to vibrate with memory. The notes curled around her, soft as silk, insistent as a heartbeat. A vision flickered behind her eyelids. Ron's laugh, bright and warm, the scent of old parchment and ginger tea, the way sunlight used to catch in Harry's glasses. But beneath the comfort, something darker stirred, a whisper of loneliness, the ache of choices made in fire and fear. Her fingers tightened on the rock, knuckles white. Draco took a step back, his jaw clenched. "It's not real, it's enchantment." "Isn't it?" she murmured. The song wrapped around her thoughts, not distorting them, but amplifying. Every buried regret, every unspoken desire, every secret wish she'd buried beneath logic and duty rose to the surface, gilded in melody. She saw herself standing at a crossroads, books scattered at her feet, a hand reaching for her from the shadows, a life unlived. The ache was exquisite. He moved toward her, not with his usual sneer, but with something raw in his gaze. "Hermione, look at me." She turned. His face was paler than usual, shadows under his eyes, but his voice was steady. "This is how it starts. My great-aunt Ilara, she heard it once, as a girl, spent 3 days weeping for a man she'd never met. Then she tried to walk into the sea." Hermione blinked, the vision fracturing. "The psalm did that?" "It doesn't lie," he said, voice low. "It finds what's already there, and it makes you want to drown in it." A cold edge cut through the warmth. She swallowed, forcing herself to breathe through her nose, to ground herself in the salt stung air, the rough stone beneath her palm. "Then we have to resist resonance, emotional detachment." Draco let out a short, bitter laugh. "Detachment? You feel it too, don't you? That pull. Like it knows you. Like it's been waiting." She didn't answer. How could she admit that for a moment the song had made her believe she was loved? For her mind, not for her bravery, but simply for being. That it had whispered of a love that didn't require saving, didn't demand sacrifice. The melody shifted. A new thread wove through the old, one darker, richer, laced with something ancient and hungry. Draco flinched, his hand flying to his left forearm, though the dark mark had been gone for years. His breath came faster. "No, not that. Not again." "Draco," he didn't answer. His eyes had gone distant, fixed on some unseen horror. His lips moved, forming silent words in a language she didn't recognize. Old High Sylphic, perhaps. The psalm curled around him like smoke, and for a heartbeat she saw not the man he was, but the boy he'd been, cornered, terrified, whispering incantations in the dark. She reached for him. "Draco, fight it. It's not real. It's not now." His hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not roughly, but with desperation. "It feels real. It feels like absolution. Tears pricked her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the unbearable weight of empathy. The song wasn't just seducing, it was revealing. And in that moment she understood this was its true danger. Not madness, but truth. Truth twisted into longing, memory into craving. She pulled him close, pressing her forehead to his, her voice a thread against the rising tide of sound. We remember, but we choose. That's the difference. The song faltered, just for a breath. Then it faded, retreating like mist before dawn. They stood there, trembling, hands still clasped, the world returning in fragments, the cry of gulls, the distant crash of waves, the chill of the wind. Neither spoke, but something had shifted, not just in the air, in them. The great hall of the Wisengomo hummed with a tension that seeped into the stone itself. Sunlight, filtered through high stained glass depicting ancient magical triumphs, cast fractured rainbows across the floor, but no one seemed to notice. The air smelled of old parchment, candle wax, and the faint metallic tang of wand oil, familiar, yet today, charged. At the center of the semicircular chamber, Hermione Granger stood behind a carved oak podium, her fingers pressed flat against the wood, as if to steady herself. Her robes, tailored in deep russet and trimmed with silver thread, marked her as a senior advisor to the Department of Mysteries, but the weight on her shoulders felt heavier than any title. "The song," she began, her voice clear and measured, "is not merely sound, it is a spell woven into melody, a relic of old Veela magic thought, lost after the Great Silence of 1682. It manifests without source, drifting across borders, affecting witches, wizards, and even muggles, within range. 3 towns in Brittany reported mass hysteria, lovers breaking engagements, elders weeping over memories they could not name, children singing in tongues unknown. A murmur rippled through the benches. Minister Thorne, seated at the apex of the assembly, adjusted his spectacles and leaned forward. And the source? Any trace? None. No wand signatures, no summoning circles, just echoes. But they grow stronger. Last night, the song reached Dover. 2 aurors lost consciousness after attempting to trace the resonance. From the upper tier, a sharp voice cut through. Typical. Another half-blood crisis dressed as diplomacy. Lucius Malfoy rose slowly, his silver hair gleaming like frost under the light. "My son has informed me that this so-called song is sacred to certain Veela bloodlines. To treat it as a threat is to insult centuries of magical tradition." Hermione turned her gaze upward, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Respectfully, Lucius, tradition does not explain why a farmer in Normandy tried to drown himself in a river while humming in perfect Sylphidian, a language he's never studied. Sacred or not, this magic is uncontrolled. It's breaching wards, altering minds. And whose fault is that?" snapped Augusta Longbottom from the left. "We buried Veela lore beneath ministry red tape and fear. Now it resurfaces, and we panic. This is not an invasion. It's a call. A call to what?" demanded Gavain Robards. "Madness. Sedition. I've seen grown men sob at the sound, as if their hearts were being torn open. That's not cultural preservation. That's emotional warfare." Draco Malfoy, seated beside his father, finally spoke. His voice was low, but it carried. "It's both." He stood, straightening his dark coat. "The old songs were never meant to be heard by just anyone. They were spells of binding, of truth. A Veela song could reveal secrets, awaken buried love, or drive a liar to confession. But they were private, intimate. Now something, or someone, is broadcasting it. That's not tradition. That's a violation." The chamber fell quiet. Hermione exhaled slowly. "Draco's right. Whether we see this as a threat or a relic depends on whether it's meant to heal or dominate. But right now, it's doing neither. It's wandering, unanchored. And magic that powerful, left untethered, will collapse in on itself. Or worse, consume those who hear it." Minister Thorne steepled his fingers. "So what do you propose, Granger? A task force. Not oars with chains and silencing charms. But scholars, linguists, Veela mediators. We follow the song not to suppress it, but to understand it. To find its heart. And if there's a singer, We listen before we act." Lucius sneered. "Tuss the mudblood to sympathize with magic she doesn't understand." Draco's hand twitched toward his wand, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he said, "Father, she understands it better than you. You fear what you can't control. She wants to mend it." The silence that followed was thick, trembling with old grudges and newer truths. Somewhere, far beyond the stone walls of the ministry, the wind carried a whisper, a single, pure note, rising and falling like breath. No one spoke, no one moved. And for the first time, the Waisengamot heard the song not as a threat, but as a plea. The cold bit at Hermione's fingers as she unrolled the parchment on the frost-dusted bench, her breath curling in front of her like smoke in the early morning air of Sophia. Snowflakes, delicate and hesitant, drifted down from a leaden sky, catching in her hair and clinging to the edge of the map spread beneath her trembling hands. The ink shimmered faintly, charmed to react to residual magical traces, and along the southern ridge of the Rhodope Mountains a soft, pulsing glow had begun to spread. It throbbed like a heartbeat. This was it. The first recorded resonance of the song had pulsed through here, 3 weeks ago, echoing across the valley below, and leaving 24 witches and wizards in a daze, whispering in languages they didn't know. She pulled her coat tighter, the fabric whispering as she turned when footsteps crunched through the thin layer of snow behind her. Draco Malfoy appeared, his cloak drawn close, his pale hair dusted white. He exhaled sharply, his expression pinched. "This is where you dragged me. A park in the middle of winter, with nothing but a glowing map. And that look you get when you're about to lecture someone about ancient harmonic theory. This," she said, tapping the map, "is the origin point of a magical anomaly that's already disrupted the Waisengamot's communications, caused 6 memory wipe incidents, and nearly incited a riot in a Parisian wand-maker's quarter. And yes, I needed you here. You're the only one who can read the old Ton inscriptions near the Veela sanctuaries." He scoffed, but crouched beside her anyway, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the glowing ridge. "You assume they'll let me near their sanctuaries. Last time my family visited Bulgaria, it was 1892, and they were negotiating a blood truce. Not exactly a warm legacy. They'll let you come," she said quietly, "because I've already spoken to Lyra Vassian. She remembers your grandmother," said she once sang with the chorus during the eclipse rites. Draco stilled. His eyes flickered up to hers, sharp and wary. "You've been speaking to Vassians? She's the matriarch of the Southern Enclave, and she's agreed to see us, but only if we come without wands." Hermione reached into her coat and pulled out her wand, placing it gently on the bench. The wood looked dark against the snow. Draco stared at it, then at her. "You're serious?" As a Dementor's kiss. He hesitated only a moment before drawing his own wand, hawthorn, 12 inches, dragon heartstring, and setting it beside hers. "If I end up turned into a peacock, Granger, I'm haunting you first." The journey into the Rhodope Mountains was silent, save for the whisper of wind, through skeletal birch trees, and the occasional distant cry of a raven. The path, barely visible beneath snow and moss, wound through ancient stone markers etched with spirals and half-forgotten runes. Hermione's boots slipped once on black ice, and Draco caught her arm without thinking, his grip firm, his breath warm against her ear for a fleeting second. "Try not to die before we find the source," he muttered, releasing her. She rubbed her arm, frowning. "Thanks." As dusk fell, the trees thinned, and before them rose a cliff, face veiled by ivy and frost. But it wasn't stone, not entirely. The rock shimmered when the fading light struck it at a certain angle, revealing arches and doorways woven from living vine and enchanted granite. A soft hum began in the air, low and resonant, like the memory of a lullaby. "The Veela threshold," Draco whispered. "They've woken the song again." From the archway, a figure emerged, tall, silver-haired, eyes like molten amber. Lyra Vassian wore a gown that seemed spun from moonlight, and around her neck hung a pendant shaped like a single perfect feather. "You have come," she said, her voice layered with echoes, as if more than one person spoke at once. "The Muggle-born, and the heir of Malfoy. The song has been waiting for you." Hermione stepped forward. "We need to know where it began, what it wants." Lyra smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It does not want, it remembers, and it sings for what was lost, and what must be found. She turned, gesturing into the glowing arch. Enter, but beware, the song knows your names, and it knows your hearts. The portkey, a cracked porcelain teapot with its handle chipped at the exact angle Hermione remembered from her mother's cupboard, shuddered in Draco's grip like a dying bird. One moment the Ministry's departure chamber hummed with the low thrum of calibrated magic. The next, the world tore apart. Colors bled into streaks. The air turned thick, syrupy. Hermione gasped, her stomach lurching as the familiar pull behind her navel twisted into something jagged, violent. She reached for Draco's arm, but her fingers met only the cold rush of disintegrating space. They landed hard, not in the mist-laced meadows of southern France as planned, but sprawled across a rocky escarpment, the wind howling through skeletal trees above them. The teapot shattered beside Draco's boot, its shards glinting like broken teeth. Rain slashed sideways, stinging Hermione's cheeks, the scent of wet stone and damp moss sharp in her nostrils. She pushed herself up, her cloak snagging on a jagged oak crop, and turned to see Draco struggling to his feet, his pale hair plastered to his forehead, his expression a mix of fury and something deeper. Fear, maybe, with a ghost of pain. "Well," he said, voice tight, "that could have gone better." Hermione wiped mud from her palms, scanning the horizon. No landmarks, no road, just a desolate ridge, the land falling away into a sea of fog below. We're off course, far off. The coordinates were precise. There's no reason the portkey should have failed. Draco kicked at the remains of the teapot. Unless someone tampered with it, or unless the Veela song is warping magical transit. You said it disrupts equilibrium. This might be a symptom. He looked at him, surprised. He wasn't mocking. He was thinking. "You're right," she admitted. "The melody's resonance could be interfering with long-range magic. The farther we get from its source, the more unstable things become." A gust of wind snatched her breath. She pulled her cloak tighter, fingers fumbling with the clasp. Draco watched her for a moment, then wordlessly drew his wand and muttered a drying charm. Warmth bloomed around her shoulders, not quite magic, more like the memory of heat. She nodded her thanks. They descended in silence, the terrain shifting from slick rock to tangled underbrush. The forest here was ancient, trees gnarled and leaning, as if whispering secrets to the earth. Their boots sank into moss so thick it muffled sound. Even the wind seemed hushed. Hermione kept her wind out, its tip going faintly blue, but the light didn't carry far. Shadows pooled between the trunks, too deep, too still. Then faintly, music. It began as a tremor in the air, a vibration beneath the soles of their feet. Hermione froze. Draco's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His fingers were cold. The psalm rose, wordless, aching, impossibly clear. It curled around the trees, slipping through the mist like breath. Hermione felt it in her ribs, in the pulse at her throat. A memory flashed. Her 9th birthday, her mother singing in the kitchen, sunlight on the tile floor. She blinked, disoriented. "No," Draco whispered. "Don't listen, not directly." She tore her gaze from the mist. Draco's face was tight, jaw clenched, eyes squeezed shut. His free hand pressed against his temple. "It's not just beauty," he said through gritted teeth. "It's a lure. It finds what you miss most, and holds it up like a mirror." Hermione swallowed. "We need to move, now." But when she turned, the path behind them was gone, swallowed by fog. Ahead, the song deepened, weaving through the trees, drawing them forward like a current. It promised warmth, safety, a place where the past could be touched. Draco opened his eyes. "We walk," he said, "but we don't speak of what we hear. Then if one of us starts walking toward the sound alone, stop them." She nodded, heart pounding. They stepped forward, side by side, into the mist, the melody curling around them like smoke, beautiful and terrible, pulling them deeper into the unknown. The wind carried the song in fragments, like shards of glass caught in the tide, drifting through the cracked stone arches of the ruined abbey. Hermione stepped over a tumbled pillar, her boots crunching on centuries of ivy-choked rubble. The air was thick with salt and something else, something old, metallic like blood on the edge of frost. She pulled her cloak tighter, though the chill wasn't from the weather. Draco followed behind, his silver-blonde hair catching the last light of dusk like a blade catching flame. He paused at the threshold, one hand braced against the lintel carved with coiling serpents and half-finished wings. "This place," he said, voice low, "was never on any map I've seen." "No," Hermione replied, "because it wasn't meant to be found." She moved deeper into the nave, where the roof had long since collapsed, leaving only a skeleton of vaulted stone open to the bruised evening sky. Moonlight spilled across the floor, illuminating carvings worn smooth by time and weather. Winged figures, some graceful, others twisted in agony, twined around columns, their faces blurred by erosion, yet their sorrow still palpable. Hermione knelt, brushing away moss from a frieze near the base of an altar. Beneath her fingers, a serpent curled around a woman's throat, its body inscribed with runes she didn't recognize. Her breath caught. "These aren't Latin," she murmured, "or even Old French. This is older." Draco crouched beside her, his sleeve brushing hers as he leaned in. "Veela script," he said. "Pre-Gallian. My grandmother used to trace these on the window panes when she thought no one was watching. Said they kept the silence at bay." Hermione glanced at him, surprised. "You never mentioned that." He didn't answer at first, tracing the curve of the serpent's tail with one gloved finger. "Mentioning things tends to invite questions," he said finally. "And my family has always preferred silence." The song rose again, not from the wind now, but from the stones themselves, a low, resonant hum that vibrated in the marrow of her bones. It was beautiful, yes, but there was a hunger beneath it, a longing so sharp it ached behind her eyes. She pressed a hand to her temple. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. Draco's jaw tightened. "I've heard it since I was a child. My mother used to sing fragments in her sleep. We were told it was just a lullaby. But it wasn't, was it?" Hermione shook her head. "It's a summoning, a lament, maybe both." She rose and walked toward the altar, where a single intact inscription glowed faintly under the moon. She raised her wand. Lumos. The light revealed a line of text carved in a spiral. Star. She gave her voice to the sky, her wings to the sea, and her love to a man who forgot her name. Star. Hermione exhaled. This wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a memorial. Draco stood beside her, his voice quieter now. "There's a story my mother told me once, when I was very small, about a Veela who fell in love with a wizard who couldn't love her back. Not truly. He bound her soul to him, drained it for power during the Great War, and when she died, her spirit refused to leave. Her song never stopped, but it changed, became something that didn't just call to lovers. It called to memory, to regret." Hermione turned to him. "And you think that's what this is? Her?" "I think," he said slowly, "that someone's woken her." The wind surged, and the song swelled with it, clearer now, almost articulate. A woman's voice, wordless but weeping, echoed through the ruins. The carvings seemed to shift in the moonlight, wings now outstretched. Faces turned toward the sky. Hermione felt it then, not just the pull of the melody, but the weight of centuries of sorrow. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Draco reached out, not to comfort her, but to steady himself against the altar. "These knuckles were white. We shouldn't stay here," he said. "Not when the song remembers how to speak." The wind carried it again, a thread of sound thin as gossamer, curling through the pines like a living thing. Hermione stood rigid, her fingers curled around the hawthorn wand in her coat pocket. The melody was different this time. Closer, no longer just a rumor on the wind from some distant village in Provence, or a half-mad report from a watchman in the Carpathians. It was here, in the mist-laced forest of Ardèche, where the trees leaned close and the earth hummed with old magic. Draco exhaled sharply beside her, his breath fogging in the pre-dawn chill. "Still think it's just an echo." She didn't answer. Her skin prickled. The song wasn't just sound, it was memory. She'd woken last night gasping, her mind flooded with images of a woman in silver robes standing atop a cliff, her hair unbound like flame, singing into the sea. Hermione hadn't been there, had never seen her, and yet she knew, her. A rustle in the undergrowth, then silence, then light. 3 figures emerged from the mist, their forms shimmering at the edges, as though woven from moonlight and shadow. Their eyes were silver, their movements fluid, unnatural. Veela, 2 women and a younger man, their wings, barely visible, folded tightly against their backs like secrets. The eldest, a woman with braided hair threaded with bone beads, stepped forward. "You are not welcome here," she said. Her voice was layered, hers, and another beneath it, like a chord played on a ruined instrument. Hermione raised her hands slowly, palms open. "We mean no harm. I'm Hermione Granger. This is Draco Malfoy. We've come to understand the song." The Veela woman's gaze flickered to Draco, lingering on the Malfoy crest subtly etched into the silver clasp of his cloak. Recognition, then disdain. "Your name carries weight," she said coldly, "mostly dust and arrogance." Draco stiffened. "I'm not here for legacy. I'm here because the song is changing. It's not just calling you, it's calling Star, everyone's Star, and it's driving people mad." The younger man stepped forward, his silver eyes narrowed. "You don't understand what it is. You hear it as sound. We hear it as star blood star. We had a star blood star, as memory, as grief." Hermione swallowed. "Then help us understand." The eldest Veela studied her, head tilted. "Why should we? Your kind has hunted ours, caged us, tried to steal our magic, our songs. You call it research, we call it theft." "I'm not like them," Hermione said softly. "I've spent my life fighting those who see magic as a weapon. This song, it's not just affecting your people. It's unraveling wards, twisting thoughts. I met a man in Beyond who walked into the river, smiling because he thought his dead wife was calling him. That's not grief, that's manipulation." The wind stilled. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. The younger Veela looked at the elder. "She speaks truth. The song, it's not pure anymore. It's cracked." "And you," the elder said, turning back to Hermione, "what do you offer in return for our trust?" "Answers," Hermione said, "and protection. If something is corrupting the song, it's a threat to you as much as to us. But we can't fight it if we don't know what it is." Draco shifted. "We've traced it to this region. The oldest Veela enclaves. The song's frequency changes near standing stones, near water. It's tied to a place, a memory." The elder's expression flickered, grief, sharp and sudden. She looked away, toward the distant ridge where dawn bled across the sky. "You say you seek understanding," she murmured. "But understanding requires sacrifice. Are you willing to feel what we feel? To hear what we hear?" Hermione met her gaze. "If it means stopping the harm, yes." A long silence. Then the elder raised a hand. A single note fell from her lips, soft, mournful. It wrapped around Hermione like a ribbon, warm and cold at once. And then, images. A temple beneath the sea, a vow broken, a lover's scream lost in the tide. Hermione staggered, her knees buckling. Draco caught her. "Hermione," she gasped, tears on her cheeks. "I know," the elder said quietly. "Now you begin to understand. This is not a song. It is a star-woo star, and it is waking." The wind carried it again, soft at first, like breath against glass, then curling upward in a spiral of sound that made Hermione's bones hum. She froze mid-step, the parchment in her hand trembling. The melody slithered through the trees of the blackthorn wood, ancient oaks shivering as if in reverence. It wasn't human, not entirely. It had no words, yet it spoke. Draco stood a few paces ahead, his back rigid, his silver blonde hair catching the last light of dusk. He didn't turn, but his fingers twitched at his side, brushing the hilt of the wand tucked in his sleeve. "It's changed," he said, voice low. "Last night it was water, now it's fire." Hermione swallowed. "Fire?" He finally turned, his gray eyes sharp, reflecting the amber glow of the setting sun. Not flame, not heat. The star-language star of fire. Old magic. Older than the Ministry. Older than Hogwarts. He exhaled slow, as if tasting the air. "I've only heard fragments. My mother used to sing them when I was ill. She claimed they were lullabies, but they weren't meant to soothe. They were meant to wake star." Chill ran down Hermione's spine. "You're saying the song, it's not just Veela magic." "No," he said. "It's star older star. The Veela were keepers once, guardians of the old tongues. But these dialect, it's called star, Silviera, star, said to be born from the first spark that lit the world. It was used in binding spells, in resurrection rites, in war. She stepped closer, the parchment crackling. "And you understand it?" I recognized star fragments. He took the parchment from her, eyes scanning the phonetic transcription she painstakingly recorded. "This phrase here, star kale then thray star, it's not a name. It's a call, a command, rise from ash." His jaw tightened. "And this one, star mirasol veen star, means remember. The flame that outlived the sun." Hermione felt her breath catch. "It's not just enchanting people, it's trying to awaken star something." Draco looked up, his expression unreadable. "Or someone." The wind stilled. For a heartbeat the forest held its breath. Then the song surged, not in volume but in depth, dripping through the trees like molten gold. Hermione staggered, her vision flashing, fire blooming in a forgotten temple. A woman with silver-white hair chanting into the dark, her hands outstretched, embers rising like stars. Draco caught her arm before she fell. "You saw it too," he murmured. She nodded, pulse racing. A woman, in ruins. She was alone. "She wasn't alone," Draco said quietly. "Look," he pointed to the ground. Between the roots of an ancient yew, a circle of stones, nearly buried, bore faint carvings. Hermione knelt, brushing away moss. The symbols were worn but familiar. Not runes, not Latin. Something angular, elegant, like flame frozen in stone. "This is Silvera," she whispered. Draco crouched beside her, tracing a symbol with 2 fingers. "This one means bond, this sacrifice, and this," he paused, "love that burns beyond death." A silence settled, heavy with implication. "She wasn't just a guardian," Hermione said slowly. "She was in love with someone, and she gave herself to the fire." Draco didn't answer, but his hand lingered on the stone, as if feeling a warmth no one else could. The song faded, trailing into the distance like smoke. The woods exhaled. Somewhere an owl called. Hermione stood, brushing dirt from her knees. If this language is waking up, then whatever was bound by it, whatever was lost, might be trying to return. Draco rose slowly, his eyes distant. "And if it was buried for a reason, then we need to find out why," she finished. He looked at her, then really looked. And for the first time there was no sarcasm, no shield of old grudges. Just a quiet understanding, forged in the echo of a song. Neither of them could resist. "We're not just hunting a melody," he said. "We're following a memory. And if we're not careful," Hermione added, "it might remember us first." The air atop the cliffs of Lysanth tasted of salt and old magic, sharp and silver on the tongue. Below, the sea crashed against obsidian rocks, each wave a whispered incantation lost to time. Hermione pulled her cloak tighter, the fabric heavy with protective charms, but it did little to ease the chill that had nothing to do with weather. The song had grown louder over the past 3 days, less a sound now, more a presence that curled around the bones and hummed in the blood. It had followed them from the forests of Ardek, where villagers danced barefoot in the moonlight, their eyes glazed with forgotten longing. Now, at the edge of the gnome world, it pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the wind. Draco walked a few paces ahead, his stride measured, his face unreadable. He hadn't spoken since they'd passed the first sentinel, half-seen figures in the mist, their wings folded like shadows against the stone. But Hermione had seen the way his fingers twitched at his side, the subtle tension in his jaw. He knew, as she did, that they were stepping into something ancient, something dangerous. The cave mouth loomed before them, veiled by a curtain of ivy threaded with glowing moths. Their wings flickered in patterns, messages perhaps, or warnings. Draco reached out, not to push the Vides aside, but to speak. A low, lilting phrase slipped from his lips, one she didn't recognize. The air shimmered, the ivy parted. Inside, the world changed. The cave was vast, its ceiling lost in swirling auroras of pale blue and gold. The ground sloped gently downward, paved with smooth river stones that glowed faintly beneath their feet, and at the center, seated upon a throne of fused coral and bone, was the oracle. She was not what Hermione had expected. No crown, no robes of ceremony. Her hair fell like liquid moonlight over bare shoulders, and her wings, translucent and vast, draped behind her like a second shadow. Her eyes, when they opened, were neither human nor bird, but something older, deeper. "You carry the psalm in your bones," the Veela said, her voice a harmony of many tones, none of them quite her own. "One of you resists, one of you listens too well." Hermione swallowed. "We've come to understand it, to stop it, if we must." The oracle tilted her head. "Stop it? The psalm is memory. It is grief. It is the last breath of a love that refused to die. Can you silence the wind, child, because it howls in winter?" Draco stepped forward, his voice cool but not unkind. "It's driving people mad. Towns are burning. Wands are turned inward. This isn't memory, it's possession. And whose fault is that?" The oracle's gaze sharpened. "The song was buried for a reason. Your kind walled it away, called it dangerous, unnatural. But it was not the song that was dangerous. It was the fear of what it revealed." A silence stretched, thick with unspoken histories. Hermione felt the weight of centuries pressing down. "Who sang it last?" she asked softly. The oracle closed her eyes. "A prince, a wand-bearer, a fool." She opened them again, and there was sorrow there, raw and ancient. "He loved a Veela, not as a man loves a myth, but as one soul loves another. When war came, the one your histories call the Sundering, they were torn apart. He died cursing the ministry. She sang over his body until her voice became something else, something that could not be contained." Hermione's breath caught. "And now it's returning. Because the wound has never healed," the oracle murmured, "and because someone has called it back." Draco went very still. "Who?" The oracle's gaze lingered on him, knowing. "Ask your mother's journals. Draco Malfoy. Ask the locket she never opened. Some silences are louder than songs." The air inside the oracle's chamber was thick with the scent of burnt lavender and old parchment, a cloying sweetness that clung to the back of Hermione's throat. The walls were carved from obsidian veined with silver, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat beneath their fingertips. Before them, the oracle sat cross-legged on a dais of twisted roots, her eyes milky white and unseeing, yet fixed unnervingly on Draco as he shifted his weight, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm against his wand. "The song," the oracle began, her voice a low hum that resonated through the stone floor, "was never meant to enchant. It was meant to remember." Hermione exchanged a glance with Draco. He arched an eyebrow, skepticism etched into the sharp angle of his jaw, but said nothing. "It began," the oracle continued, "in the age when Veela walked openly among wizards, not as exotics whispered about in ballads, but as allies, as lovers, as kin." She lifted a trembling hand, and the air shimmered. A vision bloomed before them, towering spires wreathed in flame, not destructive, but alive, dancing like ribbons in the wind. A city of fire and song built upon the cliffs of what is now southern France. "That was Alar," she whispered, "the last united court, where bloodlines mingled, and oaths were sealed, not with magic, but with song." Draco's breath caught. "The Veela binding song." "Not just any," the oracle replied. "A vow, a promise forged in grief and hope. When the first Veela child was burned at the stake by fearful wizards, the elders of Alar gathered. They sang, not to conquer, not to charm, but to bind. They wove a melody into the fabric of the land itself, a spell of remembrance. Whoever heard it would feel the weight of that betrayal. They would remember the cost of fear." Hermione's chest tightened. "So it was a warning, a plea," the oracle corrected. "The song was meant to echo only in moments of great peril, when hatred threatened to rise again. It was to stir not desire, but conscience, to make the listener feel the sorrow of that child, the fury of her mother, the silence of those who did nothing." Draco looked away, jaw clenched, and then it was forgotten. "Suppress," the oracle said sharply. When the ministry rose, when pure-blood ideology took root, the song became dangerous. It reminded too many of their complicity, of their shame, so they silenced it, buried it beneath laws and lies. They called it seduction magic, cursed it, erased it from histories. But songs like this, they do not die. They wait. A silence settles, heavy and warm, like ash falling after a fire. Hermione stepped forward. "Why is it returning now?" "Because the wound is festering," the oracle said. "The old hatred stirs in new forms. fear of the unknown, distrust of difference. The song senses the imbalance. It returns to fulfill its purpose. Draco turned back, his voice softer now. And the madness? The enchantments people report? A distortion, she said, like a mirror cracked. The song was never meant to control, but when it is severed from its meaning, when heard by hearts already poisoned by pride or grief, it twists. It becomes what they fear, manipulation, obsession, but that is not its nature. Hermione closed her eyes, the melody, faint but persistent, humming in the back of her mind. She had heard it in the forests of Normandy, in the ruins of a coastal chapel, always just beyond reach. Now she understood. It wasn't calling her to desire. It was calling her to remember. We have to find its source, she said, opening her eyes. Before it drives more people to ruin. Draco looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since they'd begun this journey. Not with disdain, not with reluctance, but with something like understanding. And when we do, he asked, what then? We listen, Hermione said. Properly. Not as wizards or Veela, not as enemies, but as those who are willing to remember. The oracle smiled faintly, and the chamber dimmed as if in reverence. Outside, the wind carried a single note, clear, sorrowful, and terribly alive. The wind carried it again just before dawn, the thread of melody, silver and aching, curling through the cracks in the stone walls of the abandoned chateau where they'd taken shelter. Hermione sat bolt upright, her breath catching. It wasn't just sound, it was memory. The scent of jasmine and salt water, a child's hand slipping from hers, a promise broken before she'd even known it was made. Draco stirred beside the dying fire, his hand instinctively reaching for his wand. It's back, he murmured, voice rough with sleep and something darker, recognition. It's stronger, she whispered. Closer. He stood slowly, his silhouette sharp against the gray light. We're near the source. I can feel it in the air, like static before a storm. He glanced at her, his gray eyes unreadable. And you reacted. I remembered something, she admitted. Not mine, or maybe it was. Like a dream I've had 1,000 times, but could never place. She wrapped her arms around herself. A woman singing. In a garden, no, on a cliff, overlooking the sea. She was weeping, and then, silence, a tearing sound, like paper ripped down the middle. Draco exhaled sharply. The pact. What pact? He hesitated, then moved to the far wall, brushing aside centuries of dust and ivy with a murmured spell. Beneath, faint but unmistakable, were carvings, figures entwined in dance, wings unfurled, hands clasped over a glowing heart. Below them, words in Old Veelan, flowing in serpentine. Hermione stepped closer. This is it, the language in the archives, the one they said only Malfoys could read. He traced the inscription with a fingertip, voice low. The star. When blood calls to blood and song calls to song, the vow shall endure, unless betrayed by those who swear it. He paused. There's more. Star. We biv our voice, not our soul. We bind our magic, not our fate. So long as the promise stands, the song sleeps. When it is broken, it weeps. Star. Hermione's pulse thudded in her ears. They sealed the song. No, Draco said quietly. They betrayed it. The Veela offered their song as a bridge, a way to weave harmony between our worlds. Not control, not domination, balance. In return, the wizarding families of old, my ancestors among them, swore to protect their sanctuaries, to honor their autonomy, to never seek to possess the song. And they broke that vow. He nodded. They tried to weaponize it. During the Great Schism, the Council of Elders sought to use the psalm to subdue rebellious regions, to force loyalty, to erase dissent. His jaw tightened. The Veela refused, so the wizards took it. They imprisoned the high singer, tore the melody from her throat, and bound it in enchanted stone. But the song wasn't meant to be caged. It twisted, it mourned, and when the singer died, when her heart broke from the silence, it shattered the seal. The song isn't calling people, Hermione realized. It's grieving, and searching, Draco added. For the ones who betrayed it. For justice, or revenge. A gust of wind howled through the ruins, and the melody surged, no longer distant, but all around them. The stones trembled. Hermione clutched the wall, her vision swimming with images. A woman with silver hair falling to her knees, chained in a dungeon of black crystal. Wizards in velvet robes chanting as they siphoned light from her mouth. A child, half Veela, half wizard, running into the forest, screaming. She had a daughter, Hermione breathed. They erased her, buried her bloodline. Draco turned to her, his expression unreadable. And if the song finds her, if it finds a descendant, it won't just awaken magic. It'll demand reparation. Then we have to find her first, Hermione said, before the psalm drives others mad, before it destroys everything. He looked at her for a long moment. You felt it, didn't you? The memory. That wasn't just the song. That was a blood memory. Her breath hitched. You think? I think, he said softly, that some promises don't die. They wait. The forest floor was damp with the memory of rain, moss swallowing the roots of ancient oaks like a slow green tide. Hermione stepped carefully, her boots sinking slightly into the spongy earth, her wand held low and alight with a steady blue glow. Around her, the trees leaned inward, their bark etched with symbols older than Hogwarts, runes that flickered faintly when the wind stirred the canopy. She could feel it now, the hum beneath her skin, the song not quite heard but sensed, like a breath caught at the edge of dreaming. Draco walked a few paces ahead, his posture taut, one hand brushing the carved stone markers that lined the overgrown path. He hadn't spoken since they crossed the boundary ward, but his silence was different now. Attentive, almost reverent. His fingers lingered on a glyph shaped like a spiraling flame, and his lips moved soundlessly, as if tasting a language long forbidden. It's here, he murmured at last. Not the whole song, but a piece. A shard. Hermione narrowed her eyes, scanning the clearing ahead. At its center stood a ruined dais of white stone, cracked down the middle, half buried beneath ivy and thyme. Nestled in the split was a crystal the size of a sparrow's egg, glowing with a soft, pulsing light, amber at its core, bleeding into silver at the edges. It looked both fragile and eternal. We don't know what it'll do, she said, her voice low. This isn't just a recording. It's alive. Draco turned to her, his gray eyes reflecting the crystal's glow. It won't harm me. My grandmother's bloodline traces back to the guardians of this place. I'm expected. She wanted to argue, to remind him of every reckless assumption that had ever gone wrong in their lives. But the air had grown still, the birds silent, and the weight of centuries pressed down like a held breath. She nodded once. He stepped forward. As his fingers neared the crystal, the light flared. A note rang out, pure, piercing, so high it seemed to come from inside her skull. Hermione staggered, her knees buckling as images flooded her mind. A woman with silver hair dancing barefoot on moonlit stone, her voice weaving through the stars. A man in faded robes reaching for her, weeping. A child's laughter swallowed by fire. She saw love so fierce, it burned through time, and grief so deep it cracked the earth. Then silence. When she opened her eyes, Draco was on his knees, cradling the crystal against his chest. His face was wet, not with blood, not with pain, but with tears. Draco? Her voice trembled. He didn't answer at first. When he looked up, his expression was unguarded, stripped bare in a way she'd never seen. It sang to me in my mother's voice, he whispered. But not her. Someone before her. Someone who loved and was lost. I felt it. Her sorrow, her rage, and the song. That terrible, beautiful song. It wasn't meant to enchant. It was a lament. A plea. Hermione approached slowly, her heart pounding. And for you, she reached out, hesitated, then touched the crystal. The moment her skin met its surface, warmth spread through her fingers, gentle this time, a melody softer, sweeter. She saw herself as a child, standing in her parents' garden, the scent of roses thick in the air. She saw Ron laughing by the lake at Hogwarts, sunlight in his hair. She saw Harry alive and whole, looking at her with quiet gratitude. And then, unexpectedly, she saw Draco, standing in the great hall after the war, his face pale, his hands shaking as he turned away from the bodies, from the ruin, from everything. The vision shifted. They were older, standing together on a cliff above the sea, wind in their hair, hands clasped, not as enemies, not as friends, but as something else. Something neither of them had names for yet. She pulled her hand back, breathless. Draco watched her, his gaze searching. "What did you hear?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. The psalm had changed for her, warmer, mending, not a weapon, not a trap, a memory, a hope. "It wasn't the same," she said at last. "For you, it's grief. For me, it's healing." He looked down at the crystal, now quiet in his palm. "Then maybe that's the truth of it. The song isn't just one thing. It's what we are." And in the stillness of the ruined grove, beneath the watchful trees and the fading light, they both understood. The song wasn't lost. It was waiting. The firelight danced in shifting patterns across Hermione's face, painting gold into the hollows beneath her eyes. It wasn't an ordinary flame. It pulsed with a soft, silvery luminescence, humming faintly like a lullaby half-remembered. A Veela fire, Draco had called it. "Harmless," he'd said, "unless you lied." Then it burned. She watched the embers coil like living things, spiraling upward into the starless sky they'd conjured with a charm. Draco sat across from her, knees drawn slightly up, his posture unguarded for once. No mask, no sneer, just the quiet weight of someone who'd spent too long carrying secrets in silence. He poked at the fire with a slender branch, and it flared gently, releasing a scent like jasmine and old parchment. "I used to think magic was supposed to make you stronger than everyone else," he said, voice low, not better, just stronger. "My father taught me that. Power wasn't for protection. It was for proof." Hermione wrapped her fingers around her cup of tea, letting the warmth seep into her palms. "And now," he exhaled, slow and measured, "now I think power without purpose is just noise. Like that song, beautiful, yes, but it doesn't ask if you want to feel. It just makes you." She nodded. The song had reached them 2 nights ago, drifting through the forest like breath through glass. It had made her remember her mother's hands brushing her hair behind her ears, the scent of lavender soap, the ache of missing something she couldn't name. Draco had gone very still when it came, his jaw clenched, eyes shut tight. She hadn't asked what he'd heard. "I used to resent you," he said suddenly, not looking at her. "Not just for being friends with Potter, but for knowing what you believed in. Even when you were scared, you never seemed lost." Hermione smiled faintly. "I was always lost. I just read more books." "No," he said, turning to her now. "You had a compass. I didn't. I followed orders. I thought loyalty meant never questioning, even when it meant standing in a room while someone was hurt." His voice cracked, just once. "I didn't lift a hand to stop it. That's not loyalty. That's cowardice." The fire flickered, and for a moment it burned blue at the edges. He didn't flinch. "I've spent years trying to atone," he continued. "Donations, rebuilding, working with the ministry's reconciliation board. But it doesn't bring back what I broke. It doesn't unsay the things I believed." Hermione set her cup down. "You're not the same person." "No," he agreed. "But that doesn't mean the past disappears. It lives in the silence when someone refuses to look you in the eye. In the way my mother still wakes up crying sometimes even now." She reached out, then paused, uncertain. Then slowly she placed her hand on the ground between them, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. After a long moment, Draco placed his hand beside hers. Their fingers didn't touch, but the space between them felt charged, fragile. "I killed a man," she said, so softly the wind almost stole it. "Not in battle, not in defense. I killed him because I thought. No, because I knew he was going to kill Kingsley. And I didn't hesitate." Draco turned his head sharply. "That's not—" "It's guilt," she interrupted. "Because part of me was proud. Still is. I saved a life. But I also ended one. And sometimes in the quiet, I wonder if I'm any better than those I fought against. If I became what I hated just once." The fire dimmed, as if listening. "You didn't," Draco said. "You chose to protect. That's not the same as cruelty, is it?" She looked at him. "This song, it doesn't just make us remember. It makes us feel the weight of every choice we've ever buried. Like it's peering back the years." He nodded. "Maybe that's its purpose. Not to enchant, to reveal." They sat in silence then, the fire breathing between them, silver and warm. Somewhere beyond the trees the song rose again, soft, haunting, carrying voices that weren't there, memories that no longer belonged to the present. But here, by the flame, they were neither hero nor villain. Just 2 people, scarred and searching, learning how to carry their past without letting it drown them. The wind carried it first, a low, shivering hum beneath the usual Veela song, like a second breath exhaled from the earth. Hermione stood at the edge of the Breton cliffs, salt spray stinging her cheeks, her fingers clenched around the silver compass that had been pulsing erratically for hours. The original melody still curled through the air, sweet and sorrowful, weaving through the stones of the abandoned watchtower behind her. But now, beneath it, something else slithered. It wasn't just layered, it fought. She turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Draco didn't answer at once. He stood a few paces back, his pale hair lifted by the wind, his eyes closed. His face was unnervingly still, too still. A muscle flickered in his jaw. "Malfoy." "It's not singing," he said, voice low. "It's pulling." She stepped toward him, the compass trembling in her hand like a trapped bird. The needle no longer pointed east, toward the last known Veela enclave. It spun in slow, uncertain circles. "Since when can you feel it like that?" "Since it started lying," he murmured, opening his eyes. They were clouded, distant. The original song, it speaks memory, longing. It wakes what's buried. But this wants to take. It's not remembering. It's rewriting. A cold knot tightened in Hermione's stomach. They had traced the melody for weeks, from a cursed orchard in Normandy where lovers had wept for strangers, to a Scottish glen where a village slept for 3 days, dreaming of lost children. Everywhere, the same haunting refrain, ancient and beautiful, some in a language no living witch or wizard could name. And now it was being answered, or corrupted. She raised her wand, murmuring a detection charm. The air shimmered, revealing faint silver threads, veins of magic threading through the wind and stone. Most glowed softly, harmonious, but others, thin and jagged like cracked glass, pulsed with a sickly violet light. They converged toward the sea, vanishing beneath the waves. "It's coming from the isle," Draco said, following her gaze. Beyond the churning water, a sliver of land jutted from the mist. Inidicili, a place marked on no modern map. Legends said it had once been a sanctuary, a meeting ground for Veela and wizards during the Schizo Wars. Now it was forgotten, or so they'd thought. "We can't go in blind," she said, lowering her wand. "If someone's twisting the song, they're not just amplifying magic, they're weaponizing emotion. That compass won't help if our own memories start turning against us." Draco exhaled, long and slow. "You think I don't know that?" He turned to her, his gray eyes sharp now, stripped of their earlier haze. "My great-aunt sang that original melody to me once, before she vanished. It wasn't just beautiful, it was home. And whatever's doing this, it's using that. It's using her." Hermione studied him. She had seen Draco angry, arrogant, even afraid. But this quiet fury was new. It unsettled her. "We'll need a countercharm," she said, more to steady herself than him. "Something to disrupt the dissonance without breaking the original thread. If we sever the psalm entirely, we might unleash the trapped emotions it's been containing." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Shall we work into a cursed island, facing a sorcerer who's rewriting a Veela hymn into a weapon, and you want to preserve the melody star? If we lose the song, we lose the truth," she said. "That melody holds history, centuries of love, war, exile. It's not just magic, it's memory. And memory, even painful memory, is not meant to be erased, only understood." For a long moment, he said nothing. The wind howled between them, the two melodies warring in the air, one golden, one bruised purple, entwining like serpents. Then Draco reached into his coat and pulled out a small tarnished flute, carved from bone. "My mother's," he said. "She said it could echo what was lost, never worked before." "Maybe it will now." Hermione stared at it. "You've had that this whole time?" He didn't answer. Just stepped past her, toward the water's edge, and began to play. The air beneath the streets of Lyon tasted of damp stone, and something sharper, ozone and old sorrow, coiled like smoke in the narrow tunnels. Hermione pulled her cloak tighter, the protective runes along the hem flickering faintly with every step. The psalm had led them here, not in words, but in the way the cobblestones trembled after midnight, how the rats froze mid-scuttle, eyes glazed before scurrying away in panicked silence. It pulsed beneath the city, a heartbeat, not its own. Draco walked ahead, his wand held low, its tip glowing with a cold silver light. "It's close," he murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "Can you feel it, like fingers inside your ribs?" She could, a pressure behind her sternum, soft at first, now insistent. The melody had changed since they'd left England, no longer just a haunting lullaby, but layered now with something darker. A hunger, a promise twisted into a threat. They rounded a bend, and the tunnel opened into a cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. Below, carved into the rock, sprawled a market unlike any Hermione had seen. Stalls made of bone and blackened wood-lined crooked alleys. Vendors in hooded cloaks bartered in hushed tongues. Candles floated without flames, casting a greenish pallor over glass jars, filled with swirling mist, feathers, and, her breath caught, tiny vials of iridescent liquid that pulsed in time with the air. "Veela essence," Draco said, disgust curling his lip. "They're bottling it, diluting it, selling it like perfume." Hermione stepped forward, her boots silent on the damp stone. A vendor at a stall, made of antlers and tarnished silver, held up a vial, its contents shimmering like liquid moonlight. "For beauty that lasts," he croaked. "For love that cannot be denied." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, not touching the vial, but letting her fingers hover. The magic flared, and for a heartbeat she saw Star, a woman dancing in a meadow of silver grass, her hair alight, singing to a man who wept as he reached for her. Then the scene twisted, the man's face contorted, his hands turning violent, the song curdling into a scream. She pulled back with a gasp. "Dirt," Draco warned, stepping to her side. "It's not just memory in those, it's grief, and worse, star intent. Sar, someone shaping the song, pulling it apart." A child passed between the stalls, no older than 7, eyes too large for her face. She held a cracked music box, and from it seeped a thin thread of melody, the same tune that had haunted villages, that had driven a healer in Prague to throw himself from a tower, singing as he fell. Hermione crouched. "Where did you get that?" The girl didn't speak, just tilted her head, and the music shifted, suddenly warm, inviting, wrapping around Hermione like an embrace. She felt the pull, sweet and intoxicating. "Star, stay. Listen." "Do you want it?" Star Draco's hand closed around her wrist, sharp and grounding. "It's not for you," he said, voice low, urgent. "That box, it's siphoning the real song, amplifying the corruption." He turned to the girl. "Who gave this to you?" The child blinked, and for a moment her eyes flashed opal. "Veela," then dull again. "The man with the silver voice," she whispered. "He sings in the dark. He says the world forgot us. He's bringing it back." Hermione exchanged a glance with Draco. The original song, meant to heal, to bind, to call lovers home, was being twisted. Not just stolen, but star reforged star, into something that fed on longing, on isolation. And someone was using the remnants to build an army of the enchanted. They moved deeper into the market, past cages of silent birds, whose feathers still hummed, past jars labeled in archaic runes. Star memory of first kiss, last breath of a lover, a mother's regret. Star Draco stopped before a curtain threaded with feathers. "Here," he said. "The pulse is strongest. Beyond it, a single figure sat, cloaked in gray, hands folded over a cracked harp made of bone. The strings tremble, though no one played them, and the song, whole now, unbroken, rose like a tide." Hermione's knees buckled, because this time she didn't just hear it, she star remembered. The air beneath Knocknally's crooked eaves tasted of burnt sage and regret. Hermione pulled her hood lower, fingers twitching toward the concealed wand in her sleeve. The alley pulsed with whispers, half-spoken incantations, bargaining in Parseltongue, the clink of cursed silver. Draco walked 2 paces ahead, his posture too straight, too polished for this den of shadows. Yet his narrowed eyes betrayed familiarity. He knew where the cracks in the wards were, where the informants lurked. They were hunting a trafficker named Vesper Gallen, a man who dealt in stolen enchantments, and forbidden melodies. The Veela song had surfaced here, recorded on enchanted bone flutes, traded like illicit potions. One such flute had driven a healer in Lyon to drown himself in moonlit rapids, singing all the while. Draco paused beside a grime-smeared apothecary, murmuring, "He's in the cellar of the Black Quill. Disillusioned entrance. Only opens to blood-touched coin." Hermione frowned. "You mean human blood? Preferably not ours," he said dryly. He produced a vial of deep crimson liquid. Dragon-touched, she guessed, not human. "Courtesy of my godfather's old accounts." The Black Quill was a front for memory smugglers. Books with torn-out pages, their contents auctioned to the highest bidder. Inside, the shelves leaned like rotten teeth, and the air hummed with residual obliviation. Draco pressed the vial to a crack in the floorboard. The wood shimmered, revealing stone steps spiraling downward. The cellar was a vault of stolen sound. Glass orbs floated in midair, each containing a captured voice. A laugh, a scream, a lullaby. Some pulsed faintly with light. Others were dark, corrupted. In the center, on a pedestal of fused bone, sat a flute carved from swan ivory. It glowed with a soft, sickly blue. "That's it," Hermione breathed. "The resonance matches the reports." Draco held up a hand. "Wait, Galen isn't a fool. You'll have traps keyed to intention." They moved in silence. Hermione circled the perimeter, scanning for enchantments. Her fingers brushed a thread of invisible silk, warding thread, strung like a spider's web. She muttered a counter-charm, and the air hissed. Then the flute stirred. A single note escaped, a velvet thread of sound that curled around Hermione's throat. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, she saw her mother's face, clear and close, smiling in the kitchen of their old house. The smell of cinnamon, the warmth of teacups, the way the sunlight fell across the linoleum. Draco grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "Don't listen. It's not real." The note swelled. The glass orbs began to vibrate. One cracked open, releasing a banshee's wail. Another burst into flame, shrieking a child's nightmare. The walls trembled. The ward threads snapped like violin strings. Footsteps pounded above. Shouts in guttural Slovak. Galen was coming. "We can't let it play," Hermione said, teeth clenched against the rising tide of melody. "It'll spread." Draco drew his wand, eyes locked on the flute. "Then we break it." "No, destroying it might release the full song. We need containment." She pulled a small copper cage from her satchel, a sonic prison, designed by Luna Lovegood. It hummed faintly as she approached, shielding her mind with occlumency. The flute sang louder now, a cascade of longing and loss, each note peeling back a layer of her resolve. She saw Ron's face, gentle and sad, the way he'd look the day they ended. She saw Hogwarts burning. Draco stepped in front of her, wand raised. "I'll draw the sound, you cage it. You'll be overwhelmed." "I've survived worse than a cursed lullaby." He cast a spell, old silver-tongued, in the dead language of the Veela. The air thickened. The flute shrieked in response, the song twisting into something jagged, furious. Draco staggered, blood trickling from his nose, but he held the charm. Hermione lunged forward, slamming the cage over the flute. The world went silent. Then, screams from above. The traffickers had breached the cellar. Shadows fell across the stairs. Draco wiped his lip, breathing hard. "We're not done yet." She nodded, gripping the caged flute. Next stop, the Veela enclaves. And as they dissipated into the storm-racked night, the silence behind them felt fragile, temporary, as if the song were merely waiting. The air over the Black Sea tasted of salt and ancient stone, sharp with the tang of deep water and older magic. Waves slapped against the hull of the enchanted skiff, a slender vessel carved from driftwood bound with silver wire, its prow shaped like a swan's beak. Hermione gripped the edge, her knuckles white, eyes fixed on the horizon, where storm clouds coiled like serpents. The song had grown louder since they left Bulgaria, no longer a whisper in the wind, but a low, pulsing through beneath the waves, as if the sea itself were singing. Draco stood at the stern, one hand resting on the sail that billowed without wind, his pale hair streaked with spray. He hadn't spoken since they passed the third marker, a half-sunken obelisk, inscribed with runes that bled light. Now he murmured something in Old Veelic, the syllables curling like smoke. "What did you say?" Hermione asked, turning. "It's a ward," he replied, voice low. "Says, only the blood-bound may enter. The unworthy will be unmade." "Charming, really." She exhaled sharply. "We don't have blood ties to any Veela line." "No," he said, glancing at her. "But you carry a song in your bones, and I carry their curse." The water ahead shimmered, then split, not with violence, but with a slow, deliberate parting, like a curtain drawn aside. Beneath, the staircase spiraled down into indigo darkness, each step etched with glowing sigils that pulsed in time with the melody. The song surged, clear now, a woman's voice layered over itself in harmony and dissonance, rising and falling in a language that had no name. Hermione stepped first, boots clicking against wet stone. The air grew thick, humming with latent power. Draco followed, wand-drawn, though neither of them believed it would help against what lay below. The descent lasted longer than it should have. Time bent near the archive. Her watch had stopped at 2:10. Her breath fogged, though the water around them was warm. And then, light. The siren archive unfolded like a memory remembered. Vast, domed, its ceiling a mosaic of drowned stars. Bookshelves rose from the seabed, not of wood, but of living coral threaded with silver veins. Books did not sit on them. Instead, runes floated in the water, glowing symbols suspended in slow orbits, each one a song trapped in glyph form. Some pulsed gently, others writhed, their melodies leaking into the silence like poison. "This is impossible," Hermione whispered, reaching toward a cluster of amber runes. They recoiled, then surged forward, forming words in Gillian, the first tongue of the Veela. "Star," she said for love. They silenced her for power. Star. Draco moved past her, drawn to a pillar where a single rune burned black at its center. "This one's different," he said. "It's bleeding." The rune pulsed and the song shifted, deeper now. A lament. A face flickered in the water. A woman with silver hair and eyes like moonlit ice. She wore a crown of thorns and songbirds. Hermione's chest tightened. She knew that face, not from books, from dreams. "She's not just a siren," Draco said, voice hollow. "She's my mother's ancestor, Lyra Malova. They say she died in childbirth, but this is a burial song, a dirge." The water trembled. The runes began to spin faster. The melody climbed, wrapping around them, pulling at memories. Hermione saw Harry's face, twisted with grief, Ron's laugh, echoing in a forgotten corridor, and Draco, younger, standing in the manor's hall, watching his father burn a portrait with fire that sang. "It's not just revealing songs," she gasped. "It's pulling truth from us, our pain, our guilt." Draco clutched his chest. "Then it knows what I've done, what I've buried." The black rune split open, and the song, no longer distant, spoke directly into their minds. "Star, you are the last of the blood. You are the keepers of the lie. Sing or drown. Star." The cold of the sea did not bite. It embraced. Hermione felt it coil around her limbs like silk, gentle and insistent, as she sank below the surface. The gillyweed pulsed in her mouth, its bitter taste now a familiar comfort, and her legs had long since fused into a shimmering silver-blue tail. Above, the sunlight fractured into trembling spears, fading as they descended into the deep. Beside her, Draco moved with surprising grace, his own transformation less hesitant than she expected. His pale hair fanned in the current, like moonlight, caught in kelp, and when he turned to her, his gray eyes held none of their usual disdain, only a quiet awe. They were not alone. All around them the water hummed. Not with sound, not exactly, but with presence. The song, veiled and distant on land, here swelled into fullness, resonant and layered, as if 1,000 voices had learned to breathe in harmony. It curled through the currents, not as melody alone, but as memory. Shapes began to form in the gloom, flickering silhouettes of figures dancing on invisible floors, lovers entwined in slow spirals, children laughing in bubbles that rose like tiny stars. Hermione reached out, and as her fingers brushed a passing ripple, she saw, star felt star, a woman with hair like spun silver, singing to a newborn cradled in her arms. The child's eyes were open, already glowing faintly, and the song wrapped around them both like a lullaby older than time. The image trembled, then dissolved. "Did you see that?" she whispered, the words forming in bubbles. Draco nodded, his expression taut. "My great-grandmother had eyes like that. They said she could calm storms with a single note." They swam deeper, drawn by the pull of the song, which now wove through the water with a rhythm like a heartbeat. Bioluminescent anemones lined the seabed, pulsing in time, and ancient stones emerged from the silt, crumbling arches, staircases leading nowhere, the remains of a city that had chosen to forget itself. This was Avelaine, the lost enclave, the heart of the Veela's forgotten covenant. A sudden surge in the melody made Hermione gasp. Visions flooded her, not just images, but sensations. The sting of betrayal, the weight of exile, a council of elders, cloaked in twilight, sealing away the song in fear of its power. "Star, it does not command. Star," one of them cried, her voice echoing through the water. "Star, it reveals, and that is more dangerous than any spell." "Star," Draco gripped her arm. His face was pale, even beneath the ocean's blue glow. They didn't just silence the song, they drowned it, buried it beneath the waves with the ones who sang it. Hermione's chest tightened. The song wasn't merely calling, it was mourning, each note a soul refusing to be forgotten. She could feel the ache in her bones, the echo of loves lost, of promises broken, of magic punished for being too true. Then, a new vision, clearer than the rest. A young Veela, no older than they were, standing at the edge of a cliff, her hair wild with wind and salt. She sang not to charm, not to conquer, but to mend, a spell woven from grief and hope, meant to heal a land torn by war. But the wizards feared her. They called it seduction. They called it madness. And so they cast her down. The sea swallowed her song, and yet here it was, resurfacing, not as a weapon, but as a plea. Tears slipped from Hermione's eyes, dissolving into the sea. Draco's hand remained on her arm, warm despite the water's chill. She looked at him, and for the first time she saw not the boy who mocked her, but the man who had also been taught to fear what he did not understand. "We were never meant to hear this," he said softly. "Not like this. Not Star, truly Star." "No," she answered. "But we needed to." The psalm shifted. Lower now, softer. No longer a cry, but a question. "Star, will you remember us?" Star Hermione reached into the current, letting the sound wrap around her fingers. She did not sing. She could not. But she listened. And in that listening, she offered something the world had denied the Veela for centuries. Witness. The wind howled through the fissures of the stone archway as Hermione stepped across the threshold, her boots crunching on frost-laced gravel. Behind her, Draco hesitated, his breath visible in short, wary puffs. "This is it?" he asked, squinting at the crumbling tower ahead, its silhouette jagged against the bruised twilight. "Looks like it's one strong gust from collapsing." "It's older than Hogwarts," Hermione said, tightening her grip on her satchel, "and far more protected. The archive of Lysara isn't meant to be found, only remembered." She raised her wand, whispering the incantation carved into the ring on her finger. A gift from the French ministry, inscribed with a phrase in Old Veela. "Star, I seek not to possess, but to understand." Star, the air shimmered, and the tower's facade rippled like water, disturbed by a stone. A door, ancient and iron-bound, groaned open. Inside, the cold vanished. Warm candlelight bloomed. Along towering shelves lined with scrolls, grimoires bound in silver thread, and glass orbs humming with captured voices. The scent of aged parchment and dried lavender hung in the stillness. At the center of the chamber, seated behind a desk of petrified wood, sat a figure, neither wholly there nor gone. She was translucent, her form flickering like candle flame. Long silver hair flowed past her waist, and her eyes, pale lavender, depthless, fixed on them with quiet knowing. "You have come for the song," the librarian said. Her voice echoed not from her lips, but from the chamber itself, a chorus of whispers beneath a single tone. Hermione bowed slightly. "We seek its origin. The melody is spreading. It's hurting people, and healing others, Draco added, stepping forward. My aunt. She hasn't spoken in years, but when the song came, she wept. Called out a name no one remembered. The librarian's gaze shifted to him. Malfoy, blood touched by fire and denial. You carry the weight of silence, Draco stiffened. I'm here to break it. A beat passed. Then the spectre rose, gliding soundlessly toward a mirror framed in antler and moonstone. To enter the inner archive, you must prove you understand what the song demands. Not knowledge, not power, memory. She placed a hand on the glass. One of you must relive a moment of betrayal, not the one inflicted, but the one committed. Hermione frowned. What? You have both wounded deeply, the librarian said. The song feeds on truth. If you cannot face your own shadows, you will not find its source. Draco looked at Hermione. She met his eyes, and for a moment the air between them thickened with unspoken history. I'll go, she said quietly. The librarian nodded. Touch the mirror. Think of the moment you turned away from someone who trusted you. Hermione stepped forward, heart pounding. Her fingers brushed the cold surface. The world dissolved. She stood in a corridor at Hogwarts the night of the battle. Screams echoed in the distance. Before her, Luna, her blonde hair matted with soot, clutching a broken wand. Hermione, she said, voice trembling, I found a way to disrupt the Death Eater's enchantments. But I need your help. The runes. Only you can translate them. Hermione looked down at the parchment Luna offered. She knew in that moment that staying meant risk, delaying their escape, possibly dying. And she hesitated. Then she turned. I'm sorry, Luna. I have to find Ron. I'm sorry. She ran. In the memory, Hermione watched herself vanish into smoke and flame. Luna stood alone, her face pale with disbelief. The runes fluttered to the ground, forgotten. The vision snapped. Hermione gasped, stumbling back, tears hot on her cheeks. I thought we'd have time. I thought she'd be safe. You chose survival, the librarian said. Not unkindly. But you left love behind. Draco exhaled sharply. Without a word, he moved to the mirror. Hermione watched as his hand touched the glass, as his face tightened with remembered guilt. And then the chamber filled with the sound of a younger Draco's voice, echoing from the mirror. Cruel, mocking, Star, mudblood, worthless, you don't belong here. Star. The memory unfolded, him standing in a corridor, years ago, hurling insults at her as she fled, books clutched to her chest. But beneath the taunts, something else flickered. Fear. A glance toward the Slytherin common room, where his father's letters waited. The pressure. The shame of not being enough. He hadn't hated her. Not truly. He had hated what she represented. Freedom. Truth. A world he wasn't allowed to want. When the vision ended, Draco's jaw was clenched, his eyes glistening. The librarian bowed her head. Now you may enter. The air in the hidden glade was thick with the scent of crushed moon petals and salt, though no sea lay near. Hermione stepped forward, her boots silent on the moss-covered stone that spiraled inward like a snail's shell, the ancient Veela circle, long abandoned, now thrumming with residual magic. The song had led them here, not as sound but as memory, a haunting vibration in the marrow of her bones. She could taste it on her tongue, honey and iron, longing and warning. Draco stood at the edge, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the central dais where a shard of opalescent crystal still pulsed, faint but undeniable. This shouldn't exist, he murmured. My grandmother said the packed relics were destroyed. Hermione turned to him. Not destroyed, hidden, buried beneath layers of anti-magic wards and forgotten spells. But the song, it's calling them back. She reached into her satchel and withdrew the charmed parchment, the one that had begun bleeding ink in the shape of a melody no quill had written. The notes shimmered now, lifting from the page like silver mist weaving into the air. As the first note rang out, pure, aching, impossibly high, the ground trembled. A vision bloomed, not dream, not illusion, something deeper. A memory, preserved in magic. A woman stood on the dais, her hair like spun moonlight, wings of translucent light, unfurling behind her. She was singing. The melody was the same, but whole, complete. and as it poured from her, the world answered. Trees bent toward her. Stars blinked in daylight. The very stones wept dew. Beside her, a wizard, robed in deep blue, his face noble weary, placed a hand on her shoulder. His lips moved. Hermione strained to hear, but the words were lost beneath the song, until the crystal flared, and suddenly she understood. "We made a vow," he said. "To stand as one, magic bound not by dominance, but balance." The Veela woman turned, her eyes luminous with trust. "And I gave you the song, the heartbeat of my people, so you would never forget." But the vision shifted. Fire bloomed in the clearing, wands raised, not in defense, but in conquest. The wizard, same man, but eyes cold now, held the crystal aloft, chanting words of severance. The song fractured. The Veela woman screamed, not in rage, but in grief, her wings dissolving into smoke. And then, another voice. Younger, familiar, Draco flinched as if struck. A boy, no older than 16, pale, with silver blonde hair, watched from the trees. His face was shadowed, but the voice that spoke was unmistakable. "The Veela magic is too dangerous," young Lucius Malfoy said. "It weakens bloodlines, corrupts control." The elder wizard turned. "Your family has always understood order, Malfoy. Help us seal it, bury the song. And in return, power, purity." "A world where magic answers to reason, not emotion." The boy nodded. The crystal was shattered, the song silenced. Hermione gasped, the vision dissolving like smoke. She turned to Draco, whose face had gone ashen. "That's why the song is returning," she whispered. "It's not just calling to be heard, it's calling for justice." Draco didn't answer. His hands trembled. He stared at the broken crystal, at the place where his ancestor had stood. "My family," he said, voice hollow, "didn't just side with the wizards. We led the purge. We convinced others that Veela magic was a disease, that love like that, raw, uncontrolled, was a threat." Hermione stepped closer. "It wasn't just your family. It was fear, fear of what they couldn't command. But we fed it," he said. "We used it. My great-grandfather wrote the edicts that banned Veela gatherings. My mother's lineage, pure blood propaganda, called them sirens, enchantresses, liars. And all they wanted was to be heard." The wind stirred, carrying a single note on its breath, soft, mournful. Hermione closed her eyes. "The song isn't trying to enslave anyone, it's trying to remember." Draco looked at her then, really looked. His gray eyes stripped of pride, full of something raw and new. "What if we're not meant to stop it?" he asked. "What if we're meant to let it finish?" The salt still clung to their skin, damp and briny, as the first pale fingers of dawn stretched over the Cornish cliffs. The sea, once a roaring, hypnotic abyss beneath the song's spell, now lay quiet, its rhythm slow and unbroken, as if holding its breath. Hermione stood, barefoot on the wet stone, toes curling against the chill, her robes wrapped tight around her, like a second skin. She didn't speak, neither did Draco. Words felt too small, too clumsy, for what they had just witnessed. Behind them, the cave exhaled a final sigh, cold air, brushing past like a ghost's whisper, its secrets laid bare, but not yet understood. The bones of the old Veela, half buried in silt and memory, had sung with a voice, not their own. The psalm had not come from the dead, it had come through them. Draco wiped a smear of moss from his sleeve, his movements slow, deliberate. "It wasn't a summoning," he said at last, voice low. "It was a lament." Hermione turned to him. "A lament for what?" "For a promise broken," he said, not looking at her. "One bloodline to another. Marriage, unity, protection. They were to stand together. The Malfoys in the Lestrange line, bound by oath and oath, kept magic. But when the war came, we chose power. We chose the Dark Lord." He exhaled sharply, as if the admission burned. "And she was left to die." Hermione remembered the frescoes in the cave's inner chamber. 2 figures, one in silver robes, one in crimson, hands clasped beneath a crescent moon, their faces blurred by time, but their postures echoing devotion. And then the next panel, the silver-robed figure, turning away, while the other fell to her knees, arms outstretched, mouth open in silent plea. "It wasn't just betrayal," Hermione whispered. "It was severance, magical severance. And that kind of broken vow, it doesn't fade, it festers. Draco's jaw tightened. And now it's singing back. They walked in silence along the cliff path, the wind tugging at their hair. Below, the tide had receded, exposing dark rock pools glittering like shattered glass. The world seemed hushed, as if it too were recovering from the song's grip. Hermione's mind raced, through old treaties, forgotten blood pacts. The quiet ways, pure blood families once wove their legacies together, with magic older than Hogwarts. "Your grandmother," she said suddenly, "Narcissa, she never spoke of any connection to the Lestranges beyond marriage." Draco gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Narcissa would rather eat dragon dung than admit weakness. But I've seen the letters, hidden in the library's warded wing. She knew, she just buried it." Hermione looked at him, really looked. The arrogance was still there, the guardedness, but beneath it, something raw had surfaced. Shame, grief even. Not for the Dark Lord, not for the old ideals, but for the weight of a lineage that chose pride over loyalty, power over love. "You didn't know," she said softly. "No," he admitted. "But I should have. The signs were there, the way my father flinched at certain names, the way certain rooms were never spoken of. Magic remembers. Granger. Even when people don't." She nodded. The Veela song wasn't just a curse, it was a reckoning. They reached a small stone bench overlooking the bay, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Hermione sat, pulling her knees to her chest. "This song, it's not just calling to us, it's calling to you, through blood." Draco sat beside her, not too close, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "And you," he said. "Your magic reacted to it. Not like mine, but deeper. Like it recognized something." She thought of the vision she'd seen in the cave. Herself, but not herself, standing in a forest of silver trees, hand in hand with a woman whose eyes glowed like moonlight. A voice, soft and ancient, whispering in a language she didn't know but understood in her bones. "I think," she said slowly, "that the song isn't just about the past. It's choosing who will answer." Draco turned to her then, gray eyes searching hers. "And if we do, if we fix what was broken, then maybe," she said, "the psalm will finally be allowed to stop." Rain lashed against the stained glass of the abandoned cathedral, its fractured panes casting jagged patterns of violet and silver across the stone floor. The air shimmered with residual enchantments, old brittle magic that clung to the walls like moss. Hermione pressed her back against a pillar, breath shallow, wand clenched in her right hand. The song was louder here, not just in her ears but in her bones, a pulsing thread winding through her veins like liquid gold. It whispered of forgotten summers, of laughter beneath willow trees, of a love so deep it burned through time. Beside her, Draco exhaled sharply. "He's close." She glanced at him. His face was pale, jaw tight, eyes reflecting the fractured light like shards of mercury. He had been silent since they crossed the French border, avoiding her questions, avoiding everything but the trail. But she'd seen the way his fingers twitched whenever the melody rose in pitch, seen how his breath caught just once, when a single phrase echoed in Sophian, a dialect older than the ministry. A voice boomed through the nave, rich and honeyed, rolling over the song like a tide. "You need not fear it. It is not a curse. It is a calling." Hermione stepped forward, shielding her wand behind her thigh. At the far end of the cathedral, atop a dais of blackened oak, stood a man in robes the color of storm clouds. His hair fell in silver waves, his arms outstretched as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Around him a dozen figures knelt, wizards, witches, even a centaur with bowed head, caught in the thrall of the music, and the man who shaped it. "I am Alaric, of the Hollow Veil," he proclaimed, "the last true heir of the Veil Weavers. This song, this divine lament, is not chaos. It is return. It is justice." Draco snorted. "Justice, that's a new lie." The man's eyes snapped to them. The scholars arrive, the bookish witch and the fallen prince. His smile didn't touch his eyes. "You followed the threads, haven't you? Traced the song through the ruins of Bedtime, the drowned villages of the Channel, but you still don't understand what it means." Hermione stepped into the open. "It means pain. It means madness. Children in Lion haven't slept in 3 nights. A Merrow clan drowned themselves singing it in harmony. And yet, Alaric said, tilting his head, you feel it too, don't you? That pull, that memory. The psalm remembers what we've forgotten. That magic was not meant to be tamed. That beings like Veela, like sirens, like the old forest spirits, they were not servants, they were sovereigns. Draco moved beside her, voice low. He's twisting it. The original song, it wasn't a call to power. It was a lament, a mourning. Alaric's smile widened, and mourning for what was lost is the first step toward reclaiming it. He raised his hands. The melody swelled, no longer distant, but inside them Hermione gasped as images flooded her mind. Cities of crystal rising from the sea, wizards riding griffins over mountains of fire, Veela queens with wings of starlight bowing to human crowns. This, Alaric whispered, can be ours again. Not equality, not coexistence, dominion, the natural order, restored. Hermione shook her head, fighting the vision. No, that's not restoration, that's conquest. You speak like a child who fears the dark, Alaric said. But you, Malfoy, you know the truth. Your ancestors knew it. Magic flows through blood, through purity. The psalm amplifies that. It reveals the worthy. Draco's face darkened. My family believed a lot of things. Most of them got them cursed or imprisoned. The wind howled through broken windows. The kneeling figures began to rise, eyes glazed, hands reaching toward the song, as if it could heal, could elevate, could crown. Hermione raised her wand. We're not here to listen to your sermon. Alaric's voice softened, almost kind. Then you're already lost, because the psalm doesn't care if you believe. It will change you anyway. The wind through the silver birches of the Veela enclave carried more than scent and sound. It carried memory. Hermione stepped carefully over the moss-slick stones that marked the threshold, her wand tucked into her sleeve, her breath shallow. The air shimmered faintly, like heat off stone, but colder. This was no ordinary forest. It was a place folded between worlds, where time bent and bloodlines remembered what minds had forgotten. Draco walked ahead, his pale hand brushing the trunk of an ancient tree, as if testing a pulse. He didn't look back at her, but she knew he felt it too, the wrongness in the air. The psalm had changed. It no longer lulled. It now demanded. The western grove is empty, he said, voice low. The elders are gone, vanished during the 3rd night of the new moon. Hermione frowned. All of them? Most. A few stayed. The ones too proud, or too foolish, to believe the old warnings. They moved deeper into the enclave, where the trees grew so close, their branches fused into arches overhead, weaving a canopy that turned daylight into twilight. Flowers bloomed in colors that didn't exist in the human world, deep violet flames, silver petals that pulsed like hearts. But now, many of them were blackened at the edges, curling inward as if burned by an invisible fire. A figure emerged from the mist, tall, her hair like spun moonlight, her eyes 2 shifting opals. A full-blooded Veela, untouched by human delusion. She raised a hand, and the wind stilled. You should not be here, the woman said, her voice layered. 3 tones speaking at once. The rift grows. The psalm is no longer a lament. It is a summoning. Draco bowed slightly, a gesture. Hermione had never seen him give before. We seek the source, lady. Not to silence it, but to understand it. The Veela studied him, her gaze lingering on the scar along his jaw, a wound from the war, one he never spoke of. Your blood sings with theirs, Malfoy. You carry their pride, their blindness. Why should we trust you? Because I no longer believe in purity, he said, quiet but firm. I believe in consequence. Hermione stepped forward. The psalm is affecting villages. Children are waking in the night, calling out in languages they've never learned. Animals are fleeing the forests. Magic itself is fraying. If this continues, the wards between our worlds will collapse. The Veela closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears like liquid pearl traced her cheeks. You do not understand. The psalm is not being cast. It is being star-remembered star. Someone has awakened the first sorrow. The grief of Alara, who sang her mate into the sea when he betrayed their kind. That melody was buried for a reason. It does not distinguish between truth and lie. It feeds on longing and rage, Draco had hailed sharply. And Lara was Malfoy blood, my ancestor. By oath, not by love, the Veela whispered. He swore fealty to her, then broke it to claim power among your kind. When she sang, the cliffs cracked. When she wept, the tides turned. And when she vanished, she left behind a curse wrapped in beauty. Hermione felt a chill crawl up her spine. So the song isn't just echoing. It's star-alive star. It is memory-given voice, the Veela said. And now, some of my sisters wish to answer it, to rise with the sorcerer who claims to carry Ilara's will. Others, we wish only to fade, to let the world forget us entirely. Draco turned, his face tight. Who is this sorcerer? The Veela did not answer. Instead, she lifted her hand, and the air before them rippled, revealing a vision. A figure cloaked in storm-gray robes standing atop a shattered altar, mouth open in song. The melody poured from him like smoke, curling into the sky, twisting into the shape of wings. Hermione's breath caught, because beneath the veil, the face was not unknown. It was hers. The forest floor exhaled mist as Hermione stumbled over a root, her breath ragged in the stillness. Moonlight bled through the canopy at fractured silver, too pale to feel like comfort. The song had grown louder the deeper they went, no longer a whisper on the wind, but a presence, curling around the trees like ivy. It tugged at her thoughts, pulling memories to the surface. Her mother's laugh, the scent of old books in Hogwarts library, the warmth of a hand she could no longer name. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to push it back. "Keep moving," Draco muttered from ahead, his wand casting a narrow beam across moss-covered stones. His voice was tight, strained. Even he, with his cold precision and mocking detachment, couldn't pretend the song didn't affect him. "We're close. To what?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A dream? A curse?" "You said this was a traceable enchantment. Not." She broke off as the melody swelled, a cascade of notes that shimmered in the air like suspended glass. Her knees buckled. For a moment she saw them, figures in white, dancing beneath a sky of stars, their voices weaving the very fabric of the night. "Don't listen," Draco snapped, grabbing her arm and hauling her upright. His grip was firm, almost painful. "It's not real. It's a lure." "It feels real," she whispered. "That's the point." They pushed forward, the silence between them heavy with things unspoken. The bond between them had changed since they began this journey. Less barbed, more brittle. Not friendship, not quite, but something sharper, something forged in shared exhaustion and the slow erosion of old hatreds. Then the ground opened. Not literally, though it might as well have. The earth didn't split, but the air did, a sudden rippling distortion like heat over stone. Shadows surged from the trees, figures draped in gray cloth, faces hidden beneath hoods, stitched with silver thread. Hermione barely had time to raise her wand before a voice. No, not a voice. A chord. Struck her like a physical blow. She dropped to her knees, ears ringing, vision clouding. "Granger," Draco hissed, turning, casting a shield charm that cracked under the weight of harmonic force. One of the figures stepped forward, hands rising. From their palms, light unspooled in spirals, forming a cage of sound that hummed with unbearable beauty. Hermione clapped her hands over her ears, but the music seeped through bone, through blood, through thought. "She's the one," the figure intoned, their voice layered, as if multiple people spoke at once. "The mind that remembers. The voice that can carry." Draco lunged, but a wave of resonance knocked him back. He hit a tree trunk hard, sliding to the ground, dazed. "She's not part of your ritual," he growled, pushing himself up. "She is the key," another figure replied. "The Veela song needs a pure conduit, one who has never sung but is capable of truth. The witch's voice will amplify the melody, across borders, ignite the final chorus." Hermione's breath came in short gasps. "I won't help you destroy everything. You won't have a choice," the figure said, and raised both hands. The song changed. It no longer whispered, it roared, and in that moment, Hermione understood. This was not a call to love, but to surrender. A melody meant to dissolve will, to erase identity, to turn every listening soul into an echo of the past. She felt her memories stretch thin, like silk, pulled across a frame. Her name slipped from her mind, her purpose blurred. Then, faint but clear, she heard Draco shout her name, Hermione. It was the first time he'd ever said it without sarcasm, without distance, and in that single syllable, something held. She clung to it. The world spun. The song pressed in. But deep in her chest, beneath the rising tide of enchantment, a single thought remained. I am not yours. I am not yours. I am not yours. They dragged her away. Draco's voice faded behind her, swallowed by the trees, by the music, by the growing dark. But the song, for the first time, trembled. The air in the cavern was thick, with incense and something darker. Burnt herbs, old blood, the metallic tang of magic pushed beyond its limits. Hermione lay on a slab of cold limestone, wrists bound with silver cords that hissed faintly against her skin. Her breath came in shallow bursts, each one a struggle against the weight pressing on her chest. Above her, the ceiling shimmered with runes carved in moonlight chalk, pulsing in time with the distant haunting melody that had lured her here. The Veela song. It still curled through the tunnels like smoke, beguiling, insistent, tugging at memories she hadn't known she'd buried. Her mother's laughter, the warmth of a fireplace at Hogwarts, a hand brushing hers in the library, though she couldn't recall. Footsteps echoed, soft, deliberate, robes whispered against stone. The cultists were gathering. She could hear their murmurs, ancient syllables strung together like a prayer. They believed the song would awaken a dormant power in her, a forgotten bloodline. They were wrong. She wasn't Veela. She was bait. And then, a different sound. A muffled thud, a choked gasp, silence. A shadow detached itself from the archway, pale, sharp-featured, moving like a blade through oil. Draco, his wand was drawn, but he didn't speak a spell. Instead, he crouched beside her, fingers already working at the silver cords. His touch was careful, clinical, but she felt the tremor in his hands. "Malfoy," she whispered, voice raw. "You shouldn't have come. I've done dumber things for less annoying people," he murmured, not looking up. The last cord fell away. He helped her sit, one arm braced against her back. "Can you stand?" Her tried. Her legs shook, but she managed. The runes above flickered, disturbed by the break in ritual. Somewhere deep in the tunnels, a voice cried out. "A warning. They'll be here in seconds," Draco said. "We need to move." Now, he pulled a small crystal from his pocket, pale blue, humming softly. A Veela tear, she realized. A counter-harmony. He crushed it between his fingers, and for a heartbeat the song stuttered. They ran. The tunnels twisted like roots, damp and narrow. Hermione stumbled, her magic still bound by residue enchantments. Draco caught her elbow, his grip firm. She could hear chanting rising behind them, frantic now, angry. Torches flared to life along the walls, casting frantic shadows. "They'll summon the echo," she panted. "The song remembers where it's been. Then we give it something else to remember." He turned abruptly into a side passage, shoving her against the wall. From his sleeve he drew a thin silver flute, ancient, engraved with serpents coiled around stars. A Malfoy heirloom, she guessed. He raised it to his lips and played. Not the Veela song, something older, slower. A lament in a language she didn't know but felt in her bones. The air thickened. The torches dimmed. Behind them, the chanting faltered, confused. "That's not—" "No," he said, lowering the flute. "That's a ward. A memory charmed for sound. It'll buy us minutes." They moved again faster now, through a crumbling archway and up a slope of broken stairs. The air grew colder, fresher. Ahead, an opening. Moonlight. But as they neared, figures stepped into the gap. Robes billowing, eyes glazed with enchantment. 5 of them. The high chorus. Draco stepped in front of her. "You don't understand what you're unleashing," he said, voice steady. "That song isn't a key. It's a wound." One of the cultists laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You speak as one who fears inheritance. She carries the blood. The song chooses." "The song chooses no one," Draco snapped. "It's star feeds star, and you've been feeding it lies." He raised the flute again, but this time the cultists were ready. A wave of sound erupted from their throats, a twisted harmony meant to shatter thought, to drown will. Hermione fell to her knees, hands clamped over her ears. But through the agony, she saw Draco stand firm. He didn't play. Instead, he began to sing star. In the same old tongue, voice low, resonant, defiant. Not a counter-melody, a refusal. The ground trembled. The moon above fractured into shards of light. And for the first time since the song had begun, the air fell silent. Draco turned, breathing hard. "Come on," she rose. They stepped through the ruins, into the forest beyond. Behind them, the cavern collapsed into itself, swallowed by earth and shadow. And far away, across the sea, the first note of the Veela song faltered, just for a breath, before singing on. The wind howled through the jagged peaks of Mont d'Angre, tearing at Hermione's robes like invisible hands, desperate to pull her from the cliff's edge. Below, the valley shimmered with unnatural light, shifting hues of silver and violet, pulsing like a heartbeat. The corrupted song had risen to a fever pitch, no longer a mere melody, but a living force, writhing through the air like smoke made sound. It coiled around the ancient stones of the ruined sanctuary, cracking the moss-covered pillars, sending tremors through the earth. Draco stood beside her, his face pale, jaw clenched. He had gone still the moment they heard it, the true song, rising in response from somewhere deep within the mountain. "It's fighting back," he said, voice barely audible over the storm. "The original, it remembers." Hermione tightened her grip on her wand. The air tasted metallic, thick with raw magic. Every breath sent a shiver down her spine, as if the very oxygen had been enchanted. She could feel the pull of the corrupted song, the seduction in its notes, the way it whispered promises in the language of longing. It wanted her to surrender, to forget why she had come. But then, like a thread of gold woven through shadow, the true melody emerged. It was softer, older, a lullaby sung in a tongue no one alive had spoken in centuries. The Veela song in its purest form, born not of possession but of grief. It spoke of a love torn apart by war, of a vow broken beneath these very peaks. It was not meant to enchant, it was meant to mourn, and the corrupted song raged against it. The two melodies clashed in the sky above the mountain, twisting into a vortex of light and sound. Arcs of energy split the clouds, striking the ground with thunderous cracks. Hermione staggered as a wave of dissonance slammed into her chest, her mind flooded with fragmented memories. Not her own. A woman with silver hair weeping over a fallen warrior. A man screaming her name as chains of black iron dragged him into darkness. A spell woven not with wands, but with breath and blood and sorrow. "Draco," she cried, clutching her head. "The binding, it's failing." He was already moving, pulling a vial of iridescent liquid from his coat, essence of moonfoil, distilled from flowers that bloomed only under a dying star. "We have to guide it," he shouted over the storm. "The true song knows the way, but it's too weak. It needs a vessel." She understood, not a caster, not a conqueror, a witness. Dropping to her knees, Hermione closed her eyes and opened herself. The sound poured in. It was agony. It was ecstasy. The weight of centuries pressed into her soul, the love, the betrayal, the silence that followed. She saw the Veela, Isolde, singing her grief into the stone, binding her magic to the mountain, so that one day the truth might rise. But her song had been stolen, twisted by a wizard who sought to control her power, to use it as a weapon. He had buried her voice, buried her name, and for generations the echo had festered. Now the mountain remembered. Draco stepped forward, uncorking the vial. "If you're going to do something noble and stupid, Granger," he said, voice rough but steady, "do it quickly." She reached for him without looking. He took her hand. Together, they sang. Not the full melody, no human throat could bear it, but fragments, sadables passed down in Draco's bloodline, words Hermione had pieced together from crumbling scrolls. Their voices, so different, one sharp with intellect, the other, laced with reluctant reverence, wove into the true song. It strengthened, rising like a phoenix from ash. The corrupted melody shrieked. The storm convulsed. Lightning split the sky in two, and then, silence, not emptiness, not defeat. A single note, pure and clear, hung in the air. The mountain exhaled, the light dimmed, the stones, cracked and trembling, began to hum, softly, reverently. Hermione collapsed into Draco's arms, breathless, tears cutting through the grime on her face. "It's over," he whispered. But they both knew it wasn't. The song was free, the truth, unburied, and somewhere, deep within the earth, a woman's voice sighed, finally heard. The air in the hollow was thick with magic, humming like a plucked harp string left vibrating in silence. Around them the ancient stones of the forgotten Veela sanctuary pulsed with a sickly light, blue at first, then shifting to a feverish crimson. The cursed saul still wound through the trees, not in notes now, but in breath, in shadow, in the way the earth trembled beneath their feet. Hermione stood barefoot on the moss-carved dais, her fingers trembling as she clutched the cracked silver locket. The source, the prison, the key. Draco crouched behind her, one hand pressed to the small of her back, the other gripping his wand like a lifeline. His breath came in shallow bursts. "It's fighting you," he said, voice low. "The magic, it knows what you're trying to do." "It's not just magic," Hermione whispered, eyes closed. "It's memory, pain, a promise broken so long ago, it's become poison." She took a slow breath, feeling the weight of centuries press against her skin. The locket was warm now, almost alive, pulsing with the same rhythm as her heartbeat. She could hear it, the original song, buried beneath the distortion, a melody of longing and sorrow, pure and untouched. "I need to find the true note," she said. "The one before the curse took root, before love was twisted into obsession." Draco didn't answer. His gaze scanned the perimeter, where the trees swayed without wind, where shadows pooled too deeply. The corrupted Veela song had drawn things from the dark, whispers in the undergrowth, eyes like silver coins blinking in the gloom. He tightened his grip. "You've got minutes, Granger. Maybe less." She nodded, then began to sing. Her voice was quiet at first, unsteady, but clear, a single thread of sound, weaving through the oppressive hum. It wasn't the melody that had enchanted villages, nor the one that had driven wizards to madness. This was older, simpler. A lullaby, perhaps, or a vow spoken in moonlight. As the notes rose, the locket trembled, and a thin silver light spiraled from its hinge, curling around Hermione's wrists like smoke. Then the forest screamed. The corrupted song surged, twisting in fury, assaulting her ears with layered voices, pleading, weeping, demanding. Hermione staggered, her knees buckling, but Draco caught her, pressing his forehead to hers. "Hold the note," he hissed. "Don't let it in. Find the harmony." She gritted her teeth, forcing her voice higher, purer. The true song fought its way forward, note by aching note. Around them, the crimson glow flickered, dimmed, then flared again as the corrupted magic lashed out. A wave of force knocked Draco sideways, but he rolled, rose, and planted himself between her and the darkness. He didn't know the words. He didn't need to. He remembered the cadence from his mother's lullabies, from the old texts in the Malfoy library, fragments of a language older than bloodlines. And so, he sang too, not the true song. Not yet. By counterpoint, a shield, a thread of silver woven beside her gold, his voice, unpracticed but true, wrapped around hers, steadying it. The two magics, hers bright and insistent, his cool and grounding, began to merge. The locket burst open. A wave of light erupted, silent and blinding, washing over the hollow. The corrupted song shattered like glass. The shadows shrieked and dissolved. The stones dimmed, then darkened, returning to mere stone. Hermione fell to her knees, gasping. Draco dropped beside her, his breath ragged, his wand hand still outstretched. Silence followed, real silence. No hum, no echo, just the wind gentle now, and the distant cry of a night bird. "It's gone," she whispered. "Not gone," he said, voice rough. "Healed." She turned to look at him, her eyes wide, glistening. The locket lay open between them, empty now, its burden released. And in the stillness something else settled. Not peace, not yet, but the possibility of it. Draco exhaled, long and slow. "Next time, can we solve a mystery that doesn't involve nearly dying?" A breath of laughter escaped her. No promises. He smiled, small, tired, real. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a mask. Rain slicked the stones of the coastal ruin, draining through cracks where ivy clung like memory. The air smelled of salt and damp earth, and the silence, true silence, was the loudest thing Hermione had ever heard. It pressed against her ears, a weight without echo. No lingering hum of magic, no siren call winding through the trees. The Veela song was gone. She stood at the edge of the tide-washed cliffs, her robes heavy with moisture, her fingers numb. Draco was a few paces behind her, still facing the hollow where the last of the melody had dissolved into the wind. His shoulders were rigid, his jaw clenched as though he were holding his breath. When he finally exhaled, it came out ragged, almost pained. "It's over," he said, voice low, as if speaking too loud might wake something. Hermione turned to him. "Not over, just finished." He gave a sharp, humorless laugh. "Same thing, isn't it?" "No." She stepped closer, the damp grass yielding beneath her boots. "Finished means it had an end. Over means we pretend it never happened." Draco looked at her, then really looked. His eyes, gray like storm clouds catching the last light, were stripped of their usual mask. She saw the exhaustion, the grief, the faint tremor in his hands he tried to hide. They had both given too much to this. More than time, more than magic. Pieces of memory, of belief, of themselves. The Veela, no longer twisted by the corrupted song, no longer bound to the old grief that had festered for centuries, and retreated into the forest beyond the ruins. They moved like shadows at dawn, silent, their wings folded close, their faces turned toward the rising sun. They did not think, they did not speak, but in the way one had paused, just for a breath, and met Hermione's gaze with something like sorrow and recognition, she knew they understood. The song had not been evil. It had been a cry, a memory of a love torn apart by war, by pride, by bloodlines drawn too sharply in the sand. And it had been warped, twisted by the descendants of those who had silenced it, by those who feared its power to unravel lies. Draco's ancestors had been among them. He didn't say that aloud. He didn't need to. She saw it in the way he wouldn't look at the carved pillar where the runes had flickered and died, the way his fingers brushed the silver locket he'd taken from his mother's vault, one of the few things he'd brought with him on this journey. Inside, a lock of pale hair, and a name too old to speak. "We weren't supposed to find it," he murmured. "That's what my grandmother used to say. Some songs are buried for a reason." I thought she meant danger. I didn't know she meant guilt. Hermione didn't answer right away. She watched the sea. The waves were calm now, lapping gently at the rocks below. No more riptides. No more voices calling from the deep. "She was wrong," Hermione said at last. "Not all songs should be buried. Only the ones we're afraid to hear." Draco turned to her, frowning. "And what if hearing them breaks us? Then we break." She met his gaze. "And we rebuild. That's what healing is." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind and the distant cry of a gull. Then slowly, Draco reached into his coat and pulled out the small flute, carved from sea-worn bone, the instrument that had carried the final note, the one that had let the song go. He held it out to her. "You played the counter-melody," he said. "The one that wasn't in the texts. The one you made up." Hermione stared at it. "I didn't make it up. I remembered it. From the dreams. From the echoes." He didn't argue. He just nodded, pressing the flute into her palm. His fingers brushed hers, cold but steady. "Then it belongs to you," he said, "not to the past. To someone who knows the difference between magic that wounds and magic that mends." She closed her hand around it. The bone was worn now, humming faintly, not with power but with memory, and for the first time in months, Hermione smiled, not because it was over, but because something new had begun. The air in the hidden glade shimmered with residual magic, thick as mist and humming just below the threshold of hearing. Hermione knelt beside the ancient stone altar, her fingers tracing the etched runes that pulsed faintly blue beneath her touch. Around them the forest stood unnaturally still. No bird song, no rustle of leaves, only the echo of the song that had drawn them here, now faint, like a memory slipping through fingers. "It's incomplete," Draco murmured, his voice low, careful, as if any louder might shatter the fragile balance. He stood a few paces behind her, his wand held loosely at his side, eyes scanning the tree line. The melody we heard in Brittany, it wasn't just fragmented. It was star-twisted star, like someone tried to sing a lullaby through a scream. Hermione exhaled, brushing dust from the central glyph. This one, it's older, predating the schism between Veela and wizarding courts. A language? It's not just Latin or Old French, there's something deeper. Older. Draco stepped closer, crouching beside her. Sylphic, my grandmother used to whisper phrases in it when she thought no one was listening. Said it was the tongue of the first winds. She looked at him, surprised. You never mentioned that. He gave a small, wry smile. There are a lot of things I never mentioned. His gaze flicked to the rooms. Let me see. She shifted aside. He studied the carvings, his lips moving silently. After a moment, he began to hum, a low fluid tone that curled through the air like smoke. The runes flared, responding to the sound. Hermione gasped. That's the first phrase, he said, still humming. But it's not just about sound, it's intent. The Veela didn't sing to charm. They sang to star, remember star. She sullened for self. She closed her eyes, letting the vibration settle in her bones. Then slowly, she reached into the pocket of her robes, and withdrew a vial, crystal, stoppered with silver, containing a wisp of captured melody, taken from the ruins at Dover. She uncorked it carefully and poured the shimmering thread into her palm. It trembled alive. Human magic binds, she whispered. But Veela magic, its star breathes star. Draco watched her, his gray eyes reflecting the soft glow. You're going to try blending them. If we don't, the song will keep unraveling. It's already driving people to obsession, to despair. But if we can restore the original, balance the magic, maybe we can turn it into something else, something whole. He hesitated. That kind of fusion, it's never been done, not really. Mixing bloodlines, languages, intent. It's dangerous. I know. She opened her palm fully, letting the captured melody rise like breath in cold air. But we don't have a choice. And I trust your voice. He looked at her then, really looked. Something shifting behind his eyes, quiet and unguarded. All right, he said softly. But don't blame me if this goes wrong. She smiled. When has anything we've done ever gone smoothly? He let out a short laugh, and then together they began. Hermione wove a thread of incantation, precise, measured, drawing on ancient protective charms, grounding the magic in structure and will. Draco answered with voice alone, singing now in that old liquid tongue, his tone rich with sorrow and something like longing. The two magics met above the altar. A swirl of silver and gold, light braiding with shadow. The runes blazed. The forest trembled, and for the first time since the song had begun, it changed. The melody softened. The hunger faded. In its place rose a harmony, human reason entwined with Veela memory, not to enchant, but to star heal star. A lament turned into a promise, a curse rewritten. The air in the Veela court shimmered like liquid silver, thick with the scent of moon-blooming jasmine and old magic. High above, the vaulted canopy of living willow branches wove a lattice of light, filtering the pale glow of enchanted stars that hovered just beneath the ceiling. Hermione stood at the edge of the dais, her fingers brushing the cool stone railing, heart still echoing with the last tremors of the song. It had faded an hour ago, not vanished but withdrawn, like breath pulled back into the earth. Yet its presence lingered in her bones, a vibration beneath the skin. Draco stood beside her, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on the three elders seated upon thrones of woven ivy and bone. Their silver-white hair fell like water over their shoulders, and their eyes, pale as fog, held centuries in their depths. One of them, the eldest, a woman whose face was carved with the quiet storms long past, lifted a hand. The court stilled. You have walked where few dare, she said, her voice a ripple across still water. You have heard the song and not broken. That is no small thing. Hermione swallowed. We only followed the trail. We didn't know what we'd find. You found truth, the elder replied. And truth, child, is the rarest magic of all. Draco shifted. The song, it's not gone, is it? A faint smile touched the elder's lips. No, it cannot be destroyed. It was never meant to be silenced. It was meant to be star-remembered star. She rose, and the others followed. Together, they stepped down from the dais, their bare feet making no sound on the moss-covered stone. The air grew warmer, humming now, not with sound, but with intent. The song was born of grief, the elder continued. It was sung first by a Veela who loved a mortal, truly loved, not with enchantment, but with surrender. When he died, she sang her sorrow into the wind. The stars answered, the earth answered, the song became a living thing. But men feared it. They called it manipulation. They called it corruption. They did not understand that love, when pure, is the strongest magic there is. Hermione felt the words settle deep. She thought of the towns they'd passed through. People weeping in the streets, lovers clinging to one another as if the world might end by dawn, not madness. Star, recognition star. But it began to twist, Draco said quietly. It wasn't calling to love. It was star demanding start. Because it was forgotten, another elder said. When no one remembered the sorrow behind the notes, the song grew hungry. A sought connection, but could not give meaning. That is when it began to wound. The first elder looked at Hermione, then at Draco. You two, you walked through fire, and did not burn each other. You listened, even when it hurt. Even when it forced you to face what you refused to name. Hermione's breath caught. She didn't look at Draco, but she felt his stillness beside her. You've heard the song as it was meant to be heard, the elder said, and so it will live on, not in the wind, not in the ruins, but in you. Draco exhaled sharply. You saying it's song mess now? Not the melody, the elder said. The meaning. The song does not need voices to survive. It needs understanding. And that you carry. A silence fell, soft and vast. Somewhere beyond the canopy, a single note rose, not loud, not haunting, but tender, like a lullaby remembered from childhood. Hermione closed her eyes. She felt it, not in her ears, but in her chest. A quiet thrum, warm and familiar. The elders bowed their heads. Go now, return to your world. But do not forget, when love is true, it does not control, it does not consume. Its star remembers star, and that is how the song goes on. They turned, robes whispering against stone, and vanished into the trees. For a long moment, neither Hermione nor Draco moved. Then slowly, she turned to him. Do you feel it? He looked at her, really looked. At her frayed sleeves, the smudge of dirt on her cheek, the quiet fire in her eyes, and for the first time there was no mask. Yes, he said, I do. And the wind carried the faintest trace of a melody, no longer a warning, but a promise. The ink bled slightly at the edge of the parchment, as Hermione pressed too hard, her quill trembling for just a moment before she steadied it. Rain tapped against the narrow window of the inn room, a steady rhythm that matched the pulse behind her temples. Outside, the French countryside lay swathed in mist, the kind that clung to skin and whispered of secrets better left buried. She dipped the quill again, blotting excess ink with care. Ministry of Magic, Department of Mysteries, London. Subject: Preliminary findings on the Veela melody phenomenon. The song, I can confirm, is of ancient Veela origin. Linguistic analysis suggests it predates the Treaty of Rouen by at least 3 centuries. Its structure incorporates tonal shifts not found in modern Veela dialects, and certain syllables resonate with dormant enchantments, words perhaps, or laments. I have collected testimonies from 7 affected regions, 2 in Brittany, 3 in the Ardennes, 1 in the Black Forest, and the most recent in the Carpathians. In each case, the melody precedes a wave of emotional disturbance, heightened affection, obsessive longing, in 2 cases violent outbursts. Birds fall silent when it begins. Dogs whimper and hide. She paused, staring at the last sentence. That was true enough. But it wasn't the whole truth. She hadn't told them about the way the song curled around her own chest like smoke the first time she heard it. How for 3 breaths she had believed, utterly, that Ron was still hers, that he had never walked away. She hadn't mentioned how Draco had caught her arm that night, his grip firm, his voice low. Don't answer it. It's not real. She hadn't written about the way his voice, usually so sharp with disdain, had softened, not to kindness, not quite, but to something almost like recognition. No casualties yet, but the emotional toll is significant. 2 marriages dissolved in Saint-Cher within a week of exposure. A widower in Clairvaux claimed his late wife appeared to him at dawn, singing. He threw himself into the river 3 days later. The magic is not merely persuasive, it excavates. It resurrects what should remain buried. She hesitated, then scratched out, resurrects, and wrote, disturbs, in its place. Safer, less revealing. Draco Malfoy has proven unexpectedly cooperative. His knowledge of ancestral Veela bloodlines, particularly those interwoven with old pure-blood families, has been instrumental. He identified the recurring motif in the melody as a lament of severance, a form once used when a Veela's bond was broken by betrayal. This suggests the song may not be a call to enchant, but a cry of grief, one that has gone unanswered for centuries. She didn't write that he'd gone pale when he realized what the refrain meant, that he'd stared into the fire for a long time before saying, "My great-grandmother was Veela." They never spoke of her, not even in the family scrolls. She didn't mention the way his hand had hovered over an old locket in his coat pocket, nor how the song had changed pitch that night, as if it knew. The source remains elusive. The melody does not originate from a single point, but seems to echo through ley lines, surfacing where ancient magic still bleeds through the veil. Our next stop is the Ile de Seine, where local fishermen speak of voices rising from the sea at low tide. Veela enclaves were rumored to exist there once, hidden behind salt and storm. She stopped, listening. The rain had quieted. Somewhere below, a floorboard creaked. Then, faint, almost imagined, a single pure note, hanging in the air like dew, on a spider's thread. She froze. It was not loud. It was not meant to be heard. It was meant to be remembered. Her hand moved on its own, adding a line at the bottom of the page. Progress is steady. No immediate threat to the British Isles. Recommend continued surveillance, but no public alert at this time. She signed her name with a flourish, rolled the parchment, and sealed it with the ministry crest. The truth, the real truth, she kept folded in her mind like a secret letter. That the song wasn't just a warning, it was a memory. And Draco Malfoy, with his guarded eyes and blood-tied sorrow, was beginning to remember too. The train rocked gently over the uneven rails, a rhythmic creaking that seemed to sync with the fading pulse of the Veela song, still clinging to the edges of Hermione's thoughts. Outside, the Bulgarian countryside unspooled in muted greens and greys, mist curling around the skeletal trees like reluctant spirits. She sat by the window, her fingers curled around a chipped porcelain cup of tea that had long gone cold. Across from her, Draco Malfoy leaned against the seat, eyes closed, his breathing slow and measured. He wasn't asleep, she knew that much, but he was pretending well enough that she didn't press him. Silence had become their language these past days, not the brittle, hostile quiet of their school years, but something deeper, something worn smooth by exhaustion and reluctant trust. They had stood together in the ruins of an old Veela sanctuary, buried beneath centuries of ivy and forgotten enchantments. They had listened to the song rise from the stones, a melody that tasted like longing and smelled of salt and burning rosemary. It had made her knees weak, made her remember things she hadn't thought of in years. Her mother humming in the kitchen, the way Ron used to laugh when he dropped his wand, the warmth of sunlight on the back lawn at the Burrow. And beside her, Draco had gone perfectly still, his face unreadable, but his hand had trembled just once before he clenched it into a fist. Now, heading west toward France, and then back to England, the song had receded, though not vanished. It lingered in the hollows behind her ears, a whisper that threatened to return if she let her guard down. She glanced at Draco again. A faint scar, thin and silvery, ran along his jawline, a remnant of the war, or perhaps something older. His lashes cast shadows on his cheeks, and for a moment he looked younger than his years, almost vulnerable. "You're staring," he said, without opening his eyes. "I'm assessing," she corrected, sipping the cold tea just to have something to do. "Still think I'm under some enchantment?" "I think," she said slowly, "that the song affects everyone differently. You reacted to it, strongly." His eyes opened then, gray and sharp. "We all carry ghosts, Granger. Some of us just don't parade them around like medals." She didn't flinch. "I didn't mean to pry. No, you never do. But you do it anyway. Like you've got some moral obligation to fix everything. And you'd rather let it fester." He exhaled through his nose, a quiet, bitter sound. "I'd rather not talk about it at all." She nodded, accepting the boundary. Outside, the sky darkened, bruised purple at the edges. The train passed through a tunnel, and for a moment they were swallowed by darkness. When the light returned, Draco was watching her. "You heard it too, didn't you?" he asked. "The part about the woman in white." Hermione's breath caught. She hadn't told him that. No one had. The vision had come unbidden, a figure standing on a cliff, her hair streaming like smoke, singing into the wind. "How did you know?" He looked away. "Because I saw her too, and I've seen her before. In dreams. Since I was a child." She studied him. The tight line of his shoulders, the way his fingers tapped once against his knee before stilling. "The Malfoy lineage. Your mother's side. Veela blood," he said flatly. "Distant, diluted, but it's there. That's why they wanted me on this mission. Not because I speak ancient runes. Because the song calls to blood." The weight of that settled between them, heavier than before. Hermione set the cup down, her hand suddenly unsteady. "Do you think she's real? The woman in the song?" "I think," Draco said, voice low, "that some stories don't end. They just wait." The train pressed onward, wheels humming against the tracks. The silence returned, but it was different now, charged, intimate. Not a wall but a bridge. And when Hermione reached across the space between them to rest her hand briefly on his arm, he didn't pull away. He only closed his eyes again, and for the first time in years, let himself rest. The air in the Ministry atrium tasted of cold stone and hushed secrets. Hermione's boots clicked sharply against the marble, each step echoing like a verdict. The enchanted ceiling above, usually a mirror of the London sky, was dimmed to a leaden gray, as if even the magic sensed the tension coiling beneath. Draco walked beside her, silent, his cloak drawn tight around his shoulders like armor. They had returned 3 hours ago, covered in forest dust and the lingering scent of salt from the Breton coast, but the whispers had already begun before they stepped through the flue. "They're calling it a mass hallucination," Draco murmured, his voice low, almost lost beneath the hum of the golden lifts. "A collective stress reaction, no mention of the song." Hermione tightened her grip on the satchel, slung across her chest, the one containing the charred fragment of the Veela tablet. They'd recovered. The Ministry had demanded it upon arrival. She hadn't handed it over. Not yet. "They're afraid," she said, "and fear makes them stupid." They reached the Department of Mysteries. The door, unmarked and seamless, slid open at their approach, revealing the long candlelit corridor that led to the unspeakable briefing chambers. A junior official, wide-eyed, barely out of training, met them with a stack of parchment and a tremor in his hands. "Director Croker will see you now, Miss Granger. Mr. Malfoy, you're to wait here." Draco's jaw tightened. "I was part of the mission. I spoke the incantation that silenced the—" "You're not Ministry staff," the boy stammered. "Protocol." Hermione hesitated, then handed him the satchel. "Hold on to this, and don't let anyone touch it." Inside, the chamber was warm, cloaked in silence. Croker stood by the obsidian table, his face lined like ancient bark, his eyes reflecting candlelight like twin pools of oil. He did not offer a seat. "You brought back a fragment," he said. "That's something. That the song, it reached Prague. Then Oslo, then a village in the Carpathians. 12 people admitted to St. Mungo's with memory fractures, 3 under permanent obliviation, and you say it's a star lullaby star." "It's not just a lullaby," Hermione replied. "It's a keening, a morning cry encoded in magic older than the founding of Hogwarts. The Veela who sang it, she wasn't alive, not in the way we understand. She was bound to the stone. Her grief was the fuel." Croker turned, fingers brushing the edge of a rotating celestial model. "And Malfoy? You trust him?" "I trust what he knows," she said carefully. "His grandmother's lineage traces back to a union with a Veela seer. He read the runes we couldn't. Without him, we wouldn't have sealed the breach. Blood allegiance doesn't equal loyalty," Croker said. "You know what his family stood for." "I know what Star did in the war," Hermione countered. "And what he's done since. He's the only one who can parse the next layer of the script. If the song returns stronger, we'll meet him." Silence stretched. Somewhere a clock ticked with unnatural slowness. "Then the Ministry will not act," Croker said at last. "We'll classify the incident under contained magical anomaly. No public statement, no investigation. The Veela enclaves are already demanding silence. They fear exposure. So do we, Hermione's breath caught. "You can't be serious. That song will not be discussed," Croaker interrupted. "You will submit a redacted report. Malfoy will sign a confidentiality oath. The tablet fragment goes into Vault 717. Buried. That's cowardice. Pragmatism," he corrected, his voice soft but iron. "Imagine the panic if people knew a melody could unravel their minds, that love, memory, desire could be weaponized by a ghost's sorrow. We can't afford that knowledge in the open." She stared at him, the weight of the hidden truth pressing against her ribs. The song still hummed in her dreams, soft, aching, impossibly beautiful. And it would return. She knew it. When she stepped back into the corridor, Draco was gone. The satchel was still there, untouched, but on the floor, a single white feather lay beside it, pale as moonlight, edged with silver. She picked it up. It pulsed faintly, warm against her palm. He had already heard it too. The dream always began with water, not the crashing waves of the sea, but the still, glassy surface of a lake under moonlight, smooth as polished obsidian. Hermione stood barefoot, on a moss-covered stone, her breath shallow, her wand unlit in her hand. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and something older, something like burnt parchment and amber smoke. Then it came, a note, pure and aching, that seemed to rise not from the world around her, but from within her bones. It curled through her chest, warm and insistent, and with it, a voice, low, resonant, undeniably his. Granger. She turned, but the lakeside was empty. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches woven into a canopy that filtered the moonlight into silver threads. Yet she felt him, near just beyond sight. Another note followed, this one trembling with longing, and she recognized it now not as a song from any known tongue, but as memory, a memory she had never lived. Draco woke with his heart pounding, the echo still ringing in his ears. He sat up in bed, the silk sheets tangled around his legs, his skin damp. The room in the old Malfoy hunting lodge was cold despite the fire that had long since died to embers. He reached for his wand instinctively, whispering, "Lumos," and the weak light revealed dust motes swirling in the air like trapped spirits. It had been her voice this time, not the sharp, measured tone she used in meetings or the calm authority she wielded in the field, but something softer, melancholy, almost tender. She had sung a single phrase in a language he only half remembered from his grandmother's lullabies, words that meant, "You were never the enemy." The melody had twisted something inside him, a knot of old pride and older grief that he had spent years pretending didn't exist. He rose and crossed to the window, pressing his palm against the frost-laced glass. Outside, the black forest stretched endlessly beneath a cloud-scattered sky. They had camped there for 3 nights now, tracing the latest ripple of the Veela song to a ruined sanctuary buried beneath the roots of ancient oaks. Each step deeper into the woods made the dream stronger, and each night the voices intertwined more completely, hers and his singing in harmony to a tune that felt both foreign and devastatingly familiar. Hermione stirred at dawn, wrapping her cloak tighter as she stepped out of the tent. The forest floor was dusted with frost and her breath curled in front of her, like smoke. Draco was already awake, standing at the edge of the clearing, his back rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "You heard it again," she said, not a question. "He didn't turn, did you?" "Yes." She hesitated. "It's not just the song, it's us, or versions of us. I don't understand how, but the melody, it's pulling memories that aren't mine, or mine," he murmured. "They feel true." She stepped closer, the crunch of frost underfoot, the only sound between them. "What if the song isn't just a curse? What if it's a message? A message from whom? From the Veela, who disappeared, the ones they say were betrayed by the very families they loved." She looked at him then, really looked. "Your great-grandmother was one of them, wasn't she?" Draco's jaw tightened. "That's not spoken of in a Malfoy line, but it's true." He exhaled, a slow, measured breath. She sang to him. "Every night, until the day she vanished. They said she drowned, but my father once told me, drunk on fire, whiskey, and regret, that she was silenced, for loving a wizard who refused to protect her." The wind stilled. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Hermione reached out, not touching, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her hand. "Maybe the song isn't trying to enchant us," she said softly. "Maybe it's trying to remember." The firelight in the hearth flickered low, casting long, wavering shadows across the stone walls of the borrowed cottage. Outside, the wind sighed through the ancient oaks of the blackthorn woods, their branches tapping like patient fingers against the roof. Hermione sat cross-legged on the worn rug, a charmed quill hovering above a blank page in her open journal, the tip glowing faintly blue. The melody had been with her all day, not the full soul-rending version that had shattered a village in Brittany, but a softer echo of it, like a lullaby remembered from a dream. She exhaled slowly, closing her eyes. The notes returned, not as sound but as sensation, warmth in her chest, the scent of salt and honeysuckle, a whisper of wings too vast to be seen. She let it rise, not resisting, not summoning, simply allowing it to unfold in her mind's chambers like a ribbon of silver through smoke. Her fingers moved, and the quill danced across the parchment, not writing words, but symbols. Musical notation, laced with runes. A fusion of old Veela tonality and modern enchantment theory. This was not the song that had turned lovers into shadows and mothers into mourners. This was something else. A reclamation. A creak echoed from the doorway. She didn't open her eyes. "You're humming again," Draco said, his voice low, rough with sleep. "And not in that cursed, honeyed way that makes me want to throw myself into the sea. This one's quieter." She smiled faintly. "I'm transcribing it. The part that doesn't burn." He stepped into the room, barefoot, his white blonde hair tousled, a heavy woolen robe draped over one shoulder. He paused behind her, peering at the parchment. "You're blending siren syntax with Middle English cadence. That's not standard notation." "No," she said, "it's not. But the original melody doesn't obey standard rules. It doesn't live in time the way music should. It breathes." He crouched beside her, his presence a quiet warmth. "You're trying to make it safe." "I'm trying to understand it," she corrected, "and to give it back, some version of it, without the poison." A silence settled between them, thick but not heavy. Somewhere beyond the cottage, an owl called, its cry sharp against the hush of night. Draco reached out, not touching the page, but tracing the air above one of the symbols. "This phrase here, the rising triad, it reminds me of something my mother used to sing, before she stopped. Before the war." Hermione turned to him, surprised. She knew Veela music. "No, but there are traces of it in old pure-blood lullabies, bloodline echoes. We didn't know what they were. Just comfort." She studied his face, the softening of his usual guardedness, the way his gray eyes caught the firelight, like storm clouds touched by dawn. "Then maybe that's the key," she said slowly. "It wasn't meant to control. It was meant to remember." He looked at her. "You believe that?" "I'm beginning to." She turned back to the page. "The full song. It twists desire. It feeds on longing. But what if it was originally meant to heal it? To release it? To say, 'I see you. I remember you. You are not alone.'" Draco was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, he began to hum. It was just a fragment. 2 notes, really, a descending interval, that felt like a hand letting go. But it fit. It belonged. Hermione caught her breath. "Where did you hear that?" "Don't know," he murmured. "Felt right." She added the notes to the page, modifying the harmony beneath. The quill pulsed gold, then dimmed, as if satisfied. The air in the room shifted. Lighter, clearer, as though a weight had lifted from the corners of the room. "You've done something," he said, watching her. "I think," she whispered, "I've written a song that remembers love without demanding it." Outside, the wind stilled. For the first time in weeks, the forest did not answer with song, but with silence, deep and whole, like a breath finally released. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls of Hermione's borrowed cottage in the black forest. Outside, the wind whispered through ancient pines, their branches swaying like mourners at a vigil. She sat cross-legged on the rug, parchment scattered around her like fallen leaves, ink smudged on her fingers. Her lips moved silently, shaping the notes of the melody she'd spent weeks reconstructing. Fragmented runes, half-remembered lullabies from French grimoires, the faint impressions left in the minds of those who'd heard the song and never quite recovered. Then came the knock, 3 measured raps, precise as a metronome. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The door opened before she could answer. Draco Malfoy stepped inside, his cloak dusted with frost, his silver blonde hair catching the dim firelight like strands of moonlit silk. He closed the door softly behind him, as though afraid to disturb something fragile. "They're still at it," he said, voice low. Not a question. Hermione exhaled, rubbing her temple. "I've pieced together most of the first verse. There's a pattern in the cadence, something older than Parseltongue, older than even the oldest Veela dialects. It's lyrical, but not in a way meant for performance. It feels intimate." Draco moved closer, his boots silent on the wooden floor. He crouched beside her, scanning the parchments. His eyes, cool and sharp as flint, traced the symbols she'd drawn, curved vowels that resembled ripples, consonants shaped like clasped hands. "You're missing the resonance," he murmured. "These aren't just words, they're breath and bone. My great-grandmother used to sing something similar, only once when I was a child. My mother told me to forget it, said it was forbidden." Hermione looked at him, surprised. "You never mentioned that." He met her gaze, and for a moment the mask slipped. He saw not the polished aristocrat, not the sardonic survivor of a ruined name, but a boy who had heard something beautiful and terrifying in the dark. "I didn't remember it until now," he admitted. "Not clearly, but when you wrote that line, Star, Anya Veth, Lero Dishore, Star, it came back." She wasn't singing to charm. She was grieving. Hermione's breath caught. "Grieving?" Draco nodded. Slowly he began to hum. It started low, barely audible, a thread of sound weaving through the silence. The notes were soft, aching, rising like mist from still water, and then, without warning, Hermione felt it. Not the pull of enchantment, not the fevered desire others had described, but a deep, quiet ache in her chest, as if a door, long sealed, had cracked open. She closed her eyes, and saw a woman standing on a cliff above the sea, her hair silver white, robes fluttering like storm clouds. She sang to no one, and to everyone. Below, a ship vanished into the fog. A man's face, familiar, beloved, faded into the mist. And the psalm was not a spell. It was a bridge, a reaching, a plea cast into the void. "Star, remember me, remember us. Star." Hermione gasped, opening her eyes. Tears traced warm paths down her cheeks. Draco's voice had stopped. He was watching her, his own expression unguarded, raw. "It wasn't meant to control," she whispered. "It was meant to connect." He nodded. "The Veela were never about domination, not truly. The song, it was a gift, a way to share memory, emotion, love, across distances, across death, but power always twists such things. The Ministry feared it. The pure-blood families weaponized it, and so they buried it, called it dangerous, forbidden." Hermione looked down at her notes, the symbols suddenly clear. They didn't understand. The song doesn't enslave the listener. It opens them, to feel, to remember. That's why it drives some mad, because they're not ready to feel that deeply. Draco reached out, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the warmth of his hand. And those who heard it recently, they didn't just fall under a spell. They remembered something, someone. She turned to him. "Then we're not hunting a threat. We're following a cry." A silence settled between them, thick with understanding. Outside the wind stilled. The fire crackled, and for the first time in weeks, the air no longer felt heavy with unseen magic. After a long moment, Draco spoke, softer than she'd ever heard him. "Will you sing it again?" "The whole thing." Hermione hesitated. Then slowly she nodded, and as the first note rose between them, not as a weapon, not as a secret, but as a promise, the carnage seemed to breathe with them, as if the world itself were listening.